Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha Massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing. The officer who left returned with food, including fragrant coffee and fresh bread. Lin Yi's eyes lit up immediately. He picked up the coffee, took a sip, then took a big bite of the bread, eating with relish, even shaking comfortably. He continued muddled, I heard some mysterious individuals control the Louvre, residing on the top floor, and no one has ever seen them. Upon hearing this, Red Wine Commander's eyes flashed with displeasure, unclear whether annoyed at Lin Yi's eating manner or unhappy with the situation at the Louvre. What about the other camps? There are 5 large camps, 3 of which you certainly won't like. One is a cult, 1 anarchists, and the third is a group of fanatical feminists. The people in the room were evidently surprised to learn there was a camp entirely composed of women. They began discussing animatedly. Lin Yi shoved the last bit of bread into his mouth, burped contentedly, leaned back comfortably in the chair, and explained to the crowd with a smile. That's right. They're made up of female members more robust than men. They catch men, inject them with lots of strong drugs, then have relations with them until they're overextended and die. And they also kidnap quite some sexy women, using them as slaves at will. Lin Yi's words shocked everyone present. At that moment, many officers began whispering among themselves, not sure what they were discussing. Cough. Red Wine Commander's cough brought the office back to calm. He looked curiously at Lin Yi, who was lazily reclined in his chair, and asked, What do you do in the city then? The moment had arrived. Lin Yi smiled while announcing, I'm a merchant. Really? May I ask what kind of business you're in, sir? An officer asked skeptically, with a hint of cynicism in his tone. Food. Suddenly, the room became as silent as a graveyard, only the sound of Lin Yi adjusting the creases of his t-shirt could be heard. At this time, in the office, the only person in civilian clothes spoke. He asked indignantly, So you mean, at the beginning of the apocalypse, you managed to take over food storage points, then sold food at high prices to exploit everyone? Is that it? Huh? Is it? Ha ha ha. Lin Yi laughed. What's so funny? Are you a bureaucrat? Politician? Right? A hint of anger flashed across the man's face, and his voice rose slightly. So what if I am? No wonder when this guy heard food, his eyes were wide like saucers. Lin Yi looked at him mockingly. So what should I have done? Offer food storage to you? Let you exploit for maximal gain? We're for the people. Do you understand what non-privatized resources mean? I understand a bit, but unfortunately, I can quite regretfully inform you my food comes from elsewhere. Nonsense. There's no other food source. The civilian politician, becoming agitated, spitting saliva, strode in front of Lin Yi, extended his finger, ready to start the typical long-winded accusations. But naturally, Lin Yi wouldn't give him the chance. Bang. A dull sound. Something orange flew towards the civilian politician, hitting him squarely on the forehead. Most officers instinctively drew their guns upon seeing this, but were immediately stopped by Red Wine Commander. Red Wine Commander roared, You fools. Before jumping to conclusions, take a look at what our dear guest has thrown. His words were like a thunderclap, making everyone turn to look at the orange object on the floor. It must have been some sort of weapon. The civilian politician muttered while rubbing his aching head. But nobody in the office was responding to him. He only heard sounds of people gasping for air. The civilian politician felt uneasy, swallowed, and looked down, almost as if seeing a ghost. This is impossible. He gingerly picked up the orange object from the ground. It was a fresh carrot. The room erupted in officer chatter. A carrot? But how is this possible? Could it be fake? The apocalypse couldn't have left fresh vegetables. Red Wine Commander, with a serious face, grabbed the carrot from the civilian politician's hand and took a bite, nearly eating half. Immediately, his eyes widened in shock and disbelief. This is real. Fresh. Chapter 75, The Blueprint Drawn by Politicians. Beauvais Town, Temporary Military Command. The Red Wine Commander took a big bite of the red carrot, the crunchy chewing sound echoing in the silent office. Each sound was like a heavy plucking on the heartstrings of the people present, causing one officer after another to swallow subconsciously. When the last crisp chewing sound disappeared, the Red Wine Commander's eyes were bright as he looked around at everyone with excitement. It's true. And it tastes amazing. With that, he suddenly raised the half-eaten carrot high, the gesture resembling a triumphant general raising a victory banner. Under the dim light, the bright color of the carrot appeared especially striking. The plainclothes politician's face turned pale. Impossible. The soil is polluted, you can't grow vegetables at all. Let me tell you a little secret, Lin Yi said, reaching for the cloth on the table. He pretended to wipe the opponent's swollen forehead, feigning concern but with genuine mockery. It's a skill, you little fool. His voice wasn't loud but was like a series of heavy hammers, precisely hitting the heart of the plainclothes politician. Skill. Skill. Skill? The shocked politician stammered. The ability to talk eloquently now seemed to have vanished without a trace. At this moment, the red-wined commander was staring at Lin Yi. You can farm? As soon as these words were spoken, the eyes of all 19 officers in the room instantly focused on Lin Yi. Everyone was staring intently, holding their breath, waiting for his answer. Some even leaned forward, as if ready to catch every word he said next. Me? Lin Yi raised an eyebrow slightly, the corner of his mouth curved into a meaningful smile. His voice, like a stretched thread, softly slid from between his teeth. No, I can't. He deliberately drew out the tail tone, as if his words were hanging in the air, unwilling to dissipate. In an instant, the atmosphere in the entire room froze, as if the air had been extracted. The expressions of those officers became stiff, their once hopeful eyes clouded over as if by a shadow. Lin Yi grinned, exposing his white teeth, observing with interest the change in expressions on everyone's faces. Enjoying this moment of silence. Just when everyone thought the matter was settled and disappointment spread in the room, he suddenly raised his hand, casually straightening his t-shirt, and continued at a leisurely pace. But, my people can. These words were like a thunderbolt, instantly breaking the dead silence. The frown that had shaped the red-wined commander's brow gradually smoothed out, and his previously stilled fingers began to rhythmically tap the table again. Meanwhile, more of the officers subconsciously loosened their clenched fists, the stress-whitened knuckles slowly regaining color. Some officers even stood up excitedly, faces full of joy and surprise, whispering to those around them. Just then, the plainclothes politician suddenly rushed out like a madman. He stared straight at Lin Yi, gritting his teeth and loudly questioned, "Your people are in Paris, right?" Lin Yi merely shrugged indifferently, his face full of disdain, unwilling to engage with him. However, this guy suddenly knelt down with a thud in front of the red-wined commander, shouting loudly, "General! General! You must do whatever it takes to get these people. That way, we can revive our country. We can't let those who can grow crops fall into the hands of a foreigner like him. Moreover, he might be using force to keep them there. We can set a plan, using food to expand the camp and become a Moses-like savior, feeding everyone and restoring our country's former glory. By then, you'll be the new ruler." In an instant, the office fell silent again. But it was evident. All the officers' breaths grew heavy, some even becoming rapid. The red-wined commander's eyes flickered with an imperceptible hesitation, his fingers stopped tapping the table, falling into a brief contemplative state. It was clear, he was constantly weighing the pros and cons of the matter in his mind. Beside him, a few hot-blooded young officers had eyes gleaming with fervor. They involuntarily clenched their fists, knuckles turning slightly white from force, obviously deeply moved by the grand blueprint depicted by the plainclothes politician. Yes. This is a rare opportunity. Once they acquire those who can grow crops, what won't they have? Power? Women? Wealth? Pleasure? Everything will be within reach by then. Isn't life all about these? By then, one can become a new national hero, a founding father, leave a name in history, just around the corner. Ahem. But at this moment, an older, steadier officer stepped forward, gently coughing. This cough instantly quieted the office again, showing his significant influence among the group. The elderly officer's eyes were sharp, closely watching Lin Yi, only to see this merchant lazily sitting in his chair, his calm demeanor never changing, as if the confrontational situation had nothing to do with him. At this moment, observing this, the elderly officer became even more convinced of his suspicions, coming in front of Lin Yi, giving a highly respectful salute. This was a sign of respect no one had shown before. Then he slowly spoke, "Sir. May I ask, why are you willing to share such important information with us?" With these words, the office became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Yes. Everyone then realized, since he dared to easily reveal the ability to grow crops, it was evident he wasn't a fool, he must have some backing. He claimed to be a merchant? When the red-wined commander inquired, he seemed to know the situations of the Louvre, commercial building, Sacred Heart Cathedral, and several other forces like the back of his hand. Could it be, he had dealings with those camps, and their grain channels came from him? Could those camps be his backing? But thinking carefully, it didn't seem right. Though they weren't clear about other camps' situations, they were very familiar with the bureaucratic system of the Louvre. If the Louvre knew this merchant had talents who could grow crops, with their style, why not just seize them directly? This didn't make sense at all. Unless, crops were just one of his cards, and this merchant had more hidden cards, or some power backing him. And to look at this person, always leisurely sitting in the chair, smiling calmly, it seemed he didn't take anyone present seriously. Just as everyone was secretly pondering. Wait, what's that? A sharp exclamation, like a knife, instantly shattered the suffocating silence. All the officers' thoughts were interrupted by this exclaim. They looked at Lin Yi in shock. Seeing the merchant before them, hands suddenly revealing a large number of hand grenades out of nowhere. His movements were unhurried, like playing with toys, placing them one by one on the table. The bang-bang of their placement like the footsteps of the death god, pounding on everyone's hearts. Swish swish swish. Suddenly, all the officers simultaneously drew their pistols, pointing them tightly at the merchant in front of them. But they didn't dare to shoot. Because, as long as Lin Yi, before he died, pulled even one grenade, the chain explosions would certainly blast everyone in the office to pieces. Chapter 76, Get Out of Here. Beauvais Town, Temporary Military Command. The oppressive and murderous atmosphere, like an invisible net, tightly enveloped everyone. Droplets of sweat continuously seep from the officers' foreheads, slowly sliding down their cheeks. Their hands tremble slightly, the knuckles gripping the guns turning white from exertion, yet the muzzles stay firmly pointed at Lin Yi, not daring to deviate in the slightest. Comrade, please step aside. Lin Yi casually nudged an officer aside, then leisurely placed the last hand grenade. At this point, the entire small conference table was completely covered with 580 hand grenades. The densely packed grenades seemed ready to turn the place into a fiery inferno at any moment. Lin Yi indulgently placed 2 hand grenades in his palm, playing with them like walnuts. He calmly sat back in his chair, took a sip of coffee, and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, everyone, I'm just a businessman." Do we look like fools? All the officers internally cursed, their eyes filled with a complex mix of fear and apprehension. Yet, they had to muster calm, eyes fixed on Lin Yi, not daring to relax even slightly. "Put down your weapons, that's an order." The red-wined commander spoke solemnly, breaking the suffocating silence. Upon his command, one officer slowly lowered his gun, followed gradually by the others who also put away their pistols. Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled slightly and with a graceful wave, all the grenades on the table vanished like phantoms. This trick once again startled everyone considerably. Except for the plainclothes politician. He stepped forward, shouting, "You're bluffing." "I." Slap. Without a word, the red-wined commander delivered a loud slap, forcefully cutting off the politician's words. An officer suddenly spoke quietly, "Commander. He's dangerous. You need to take some action." "He's right, Commander. As long as he's here, our safety is at risk." Another officer echoed, with 4 others expressing agreement. "Everyone shut up. I know he's dangerous, but his stance is clear. Don't provoke me, and we can be friends. Is that right, my dear businessman?" The red-wined commander said as he stepped forward and personally poured Lin Yi a new cup of coffee. Lin Yi took a sip. It was a bit hot, but not bad. He smiled, "It tastes very French, I like it." The red-wined commander nodded and then returned to his main seat, looking around at the 19 officers, his voice serious. "Do not provoke the businessman, that's an order. If anyone refuses to comply, they'll face a military tribunal." "But..." the politician tried to counter. "Shut your mouth, do as I say. Someone. Take this guy out." The red-wined commander, furious, kicked the politician's knee. The politician screamed in pain and fell to the ground, only to be quickly dragged away by soldiers. At that moment, all those who tried to oppose the command looked dejected, like frostbitten eggplants, staring at the floor, evidently intimidated once more. The red-wined commander sat back down and said to Lin Yi, who remained calm opposite him, "Let's get back to business. What do you want to trade for food? But, I must tell you immediately that I can't provide you with any heavy weapons. Come on, what I really want is survivor coins. Just like these." A coin suddenly appeared in Lin Yi's hand, which he tossed to the red-wined commander like a show-off. The red-wined commander caught the coin, rubbed it in his hand, yet his eyes remained fixed on Lin Yi. The businessman opposite showed composure at dangerous moments, but when serious, carried with him a hint of unpredictable mischief. Honestly, he couldn't quite pin down the other's temperament. 1 pound of food for 2.5 coins. Lin Yi stated his price directly. "We have some of these coins, but not many. Because we initially felt they weren't really useful, so we haven't specifically collected them." The Red Wine Commander was obviously inexperienced in trade, at least not well versed with business rules. Perhaps out of curiosity, or maybe trying to understand Lin Yi's intentions. He straightforwardly asked, "You're definitely not using the coins for vending machines, so what's the reason?" Upon hearing this, Lin Yi's lips slightly curled, showing his preparedness for the question. In the shelter, he discovered another use for the coins, which Sylvie, a weaponsmith, had mentioned. In the use of non-combat skills, coins serve as an important currency. For instance, a regular weaponsmith typically can only craft 2 arrows at a time, but with the help of a coin, they can produce 4 at once. After Lin Yi's explanation, the Red Wine Commander nodded, maintaining a calm exterior while internally starting to ponder. The opposite side has a weaponsmith? And requires a large number of coins for collaboration? Implying that the merchant's backing must have a considerable scale of armed forces. The Red Wine Commander returned the coin to Lin Yi. "I understand. But you should accept other items as payment methods, correct?" "Of course, I also accept armor, weapons, ammunition, medicine, farm equipment, industrial devices. All sorts of things. But when I need something specific, I usually make requests to my customers. Besides carrots, what other food do you sell, and how much of each?" "Currently, I can offer you only vegetables and potatoes." Before Lin Yi finished, an officer interrupted. He spoke with obvious superiority. "Why distinguish between vegetables and potatoes?" "Potatoes are originally vegetables. Because potatoes are my main product, its quantity is 100 times that of carrots. Vegetables refer to cabbages, carrots, onions, and similar items. Wheat and corn already have regular buyers here. A week later I can supply fresh meat, and in 2 weeks, I'll also have fruits." Lin Yi, finishing all at once, leisurely sipped his coffee. However, upon hearing this, the officers in the office, including the commander, couldn't sit still. They had been exhausting themselves, running around to secure more food to fill the soldiers' stomachs, only to receive minimal returns each time. Yet, the merchant in front of them not only provided vegetables and potatoes but even meat and fruit, which seemed like a fantasy to them. How did he manage it? The officer who interrupted earlier now had a face devoid of superiority, instead filled with shock and disbelief. His mouth opened slightly, trying to say something, but seemed choked, rendering him speechless suddenly. In his understanding, surviving in the apocalypse and being able to eat was already miraculous, not to mention possessing such abundant resources. Is what you said true?" An older officer finally couldn't hold back, asking, his voice inadvertently carrying a tremor. Lin Yi gently put down his coffee cup, revealing a confident smile. "Of course, in the apocalypse without some power, I wouldn't dare to casually do business." The Red Wine Commander took a deep breath to calm himself, keenly realizing Lin Yi's presence might become the key turning point for their army to escape the predicament and embrace a new opportunity. Chapter 77, Tens of Tons Beauvais Town, Temporary Military Headquarters. Lin Yi stood in front of everyone, his expression calm and unhurriedly listed numerous varieties of vegetables available for trade. As soon as he finished speaking, the officers who had been quietly chatting instantly fell silent, each with wide eyes, faces full of incredible shock. However, Red Wine Commander remained rational. To him, a wide variety of crop sales often meant limited quantities of each, and these scarce foods might only be suitable for so-called elite individuals. But as the leader of the regiment, he was responsible for all the soldiers and civilians in Beauvais town. The large population had been stuck in a food shortage for a long time. Thus, he showed little interest in the array of other crop varieties. Instead, he keenly noticed one sentence. "Because potatoes are my main product, their quantity is 100 times than that of carrots." He intertwined his fingers, staring at Lin Yi. "Merchant, tell me, how many potatoes can you sell me? To start, how about 40 tons of potatoes and 5 to 10 tons of vegetables? 40 tons of potatoes? 5 to 10 tons of vegetables?" Red Wine Commander repeatedly chewed on these numbers in his mind, feeling as if he were dreaming. "Did you ransack all the granaries in the camps of Paris before coming here to trade with me? This is the end of days, the apocalypse. In this apocalypse, in the Beauvais town camp, people would fight to the death for a mouthful of rice. And now, the merchant before him actually claimed to provide. Not just a bag, not 10 bags, but damn dozens of tons." The Red Wine Commander's previously intertwined fingers were now tightly clenched together with excitement. His body trembled slightly, eyes wide, staring at Lin Yi with disbelief. The officers present were also stunned, their expressions transitioning from initial shock to joy and excitement, mouths agape and unable to close for a long time. If this deal could be implemented, they could enjoy more resources and privileges in the future. Thinking about no longer worrying about the pitiful rations and instead being able to eat exquisite food, they were thrilled beyond control. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Red Wine Commander came to his senses. Did you say to start? Does that mean you can sell us more food in the future? That's right, but it depends on you. Based on this transaction, I will consider further cooperation. Boom. Red Wine Commander slapped the table fiercely, unable to contain his excitement any longer. In this apocalypse, food is life, it's the foundation of running a camp. 40 tons of potatoes and 5 to 10 tons of vegetables are already astronomical amounts of food wealth. But most importantly, if subsequent cooperation goes smoothly, there will be an endless supply of abundant food. Red Wine Commander's thoughts galloped like a wild horse, as if he had already seen the Beauvais town camp rapidly growing strong. And himself, as the leader leading the camp to glory, being admired and loved by all. Moreover, leaving a grand mark in the annals of this apocalyptic history. However, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. But as a commander, he thought far more than the officers. He couldn't help but speculate secretly. Who exactly is this merchant? What kind of enormous power is behind them to provide such astonishing quantities of food? At the same time, he became secretly cautious, knowing that such a formidable trading partner, if not properly collaborated with, could have disastrous consequences if offended. At this thought, Red Wine Commander suddenly opened his eyes wide, the flicker in his gaze gradually coming. He checked his watch and realized it was getting late. He smiled, warmly inquiring Lin Yi, who was lazily leaning back in his chair. It's late, would you like to stay here overnight? We need some time to gather coins and find a place to store the food. Of course. Yak, find a place for our merchant to stay and get him something to eat. I already have food. Lin Yi smiled, a boiled potato appearing in his hand. In the Beauvais town camp, ordinary soldiers had dreadful rations. Their daily meals were hard, rough unleavened bread, accompanied by a bland noodle soup, which only had a bit of canned meat for flavor. This food was far from filling. Even though the officers had relatively better treatments, in this environment of extreme scarcity, they couldn't remember the last time they had potatoes. Thus, when the aroma of Lin Yi's boiled potato wafted out, every officer's stomach growled uncontrollably. In an instant, a chorus of gurgling sounds filled the room. Yak, as the Red Wine Commander's deputy, quickly tidied up his slightly embarrassed expression and courteously invited Lin Yi to go and rest in another building. Lin Yi nodded, rose, and followed him out. Beauvais town's night had many patrols on the streets, with gunfire echoing from distant shooting ranges. The guards, quiet and unobtrusive like owls, seemed to know everything that moved in their area. Lin Yi glanced around and remarked with a smile, "It's lively here indeed." "Yes, we are continually training new recruits, and searching this area for resources, equipment, and survivors." The two didn't chat for long before arriving at an apartment. The windows of the apartment were barred with iron, and the door was steel. On the table was an oil lamp and a cup holding a candle not yet lit. "Mr. Lin, I hope you won't mind. Tonight I must lock you in here, as this is a military facility. We have rules against outsiders roaming freely." "Understood." Lin Yi didn't care, knowing that if he truly wanted to wander out, no one here could stop him. "Thank you for understanding." Yak's deputy headed toward the door but then suddenly stopped. He hesitated for a moment, finally turning around, his voice passing through the iron bars to Lin Yi's ears. "Be cautious of Gustav, he is dangerous and short-sighted, and as you've seen, almost half of our young advanced officers are swayed by him." Subsequently, Lin Yi heard a click and then another. This door was secured with 3 strong locks. "The civilian politician, Gustav?" Lin Yi chuckled and asked Melanie, who was observing through a surveillance camera, "Report the situation." "Boss. Everything's clear, no surveillance cameras, the building doesn't even have electricity." "Did you save me dinner?" "Of course, Yu said you'd come back." Hearing this, Lin Yi teleported back to the shelter. Upon entering the shelter, he was greeted by familiar and comforting smells, instantly putting him at ease. The day had been fulfilling yet incredibly challenging. At that moment, Chen Yu, like a cheerful bird, dashed over, wrapping her arms around Lin Yi with a radiant smile on her face. "Boss, you're amazing today." "Let's eat, boss. We're starving here," Anya exclaimed with chopsticks in hand. Looking at everyone before him, warmth surged through Lin Yi's heart. It seemed the group had been waiting to eat until he returned, a sign of good spirits worth all his efforts to provide for them. On the table, freshly harvested vegetables and potatoes from the day were spread out, the sumptuous and varied dishes exuding an enticing aroma. After such a tough day, the food tasted exceptionally delicious. Sharing a meal with these beautiful and kind-hearted women filled Lin Yi's heart with warmth. Chapter 78, First transaction completed. Late night, Beauvais town, secret meeting room. The atmosphere was eerie and heavy, with dull yellow lights casting flickering shadows on the walls. Plainclothes politician Gustav looked around at all the young officers present, gritting his teeth, We must get the merchant and his talents in our hands. I am sure they are in Paris, so we have to go there. A young officer looked troubled and spoke up. We've tried going to Paris before, and we lost half of our team in the process. What about that tunnel? That's where he came from. No use. We need some specialized equipment to open that armored door, another officer answered helplessly. Nonsense. Gustav slammed the table forcefully, shouting in anger, there must be a way to open it. We've studied all the mechanisms, it can only be opened from the other side. And possibly only once. We even used explosives, but it's too sturdy. Damn it. But the merchant must bring food over here, right? Our people are keeping a close watch on him. If he contacts anyone, we'll know. So what should we do? For now, observe how he brings the food here, and then decide. We also need to find some system users with interrogation and tracking skills. I agree. I agree too. Let's eat. Everyone nodded in agreement. After reaching a consensus, Gustav's expression softened a bit. He waved his hand and said, let's eat. Their dinner included meat, various vegetables, fresh fish, and a large amount of canned food. There were even a few bottles of expensive wine. The food was abundant, but clearly, 6 people couldn't possibly finish it. However, to them, it was their entitled privilege, and they saw nothing wrong with it. The next day, early morning, the deputy, Yak, came to Lin Yi's door and gently knocked. Mr. Lin, are you awake? Lin Yi just happened to come out of the shelter and pretended to answer sleepily, awake. The commander invites you to join him for breakfast. Okay, just a moment. Soon, Lin Yi came out of the room. He had put on a simple black t-shirt, looking energetic and full of vitality. Seeing this refreshed appearance of Lin Yi, a hint of surprise flashed in Yak's eyes, but he quickly returned to calm. After all, he had witnessed Lin Yi's extraordinary summoning ability yesterday and had mentally prepared himself for his various wonders. He led the guest back to the headquarters, rebuilt from a school. On the ground floor, there was an officer's canteen. As soon as Lin Yi stepped into the canteen, a rich aroma of food greeted him. Looking up, he saw fresh bread, ham, and cheese omelets on the table. Many officers were already seated, eagerly awaiting the signal to start eating. Lin Yi sat down opposite the red-wined commander and joked, "You're showing off." "Haha, not entirely. It's just that you're a special guest, so I decided to be a bit extravagant for this meal." The red-wined commander explained with a smile, then gently clapped his hands. The officers beside him stood up and took out a whistle. Beep beep beep. The crisp whistle sounded in the canteen. "Dig in." The officer shouted. Instantly, the whole canteen resounded with the enthusiastic sound of chewing. At this moment, a young female soldier walked lightly forward and politely asked Lin Yi, "Sir, would you like coffee or tea?" "Coffee, make it strong, no sugar." "Where did you get the eggs from?" Lin Yi took a bite of the omelet, and his eyes lit up instantly. The taste was wonderful. The red-wined commander gracefully set down his knife and fork and took a white towel to gently wipe his mouth. "We have our own chicken coop." "You have chickens? Live chickens? Are you interested in chickens?" "Of course, I think after the meal, we could have another trade, haha." After saying this, Lin Yi took a sip of hot coffee, the rich aroma spread in his mouth, and he began to enjoy a hearty meal. The bread was very fresh, clearly made by an experienced baker. The ham had a bit of a wild taste, but it still tasted good. His favorite was the egg. After a satisfying meal, the red-wined commander leisurely strolled around the camp with his newfound business partner to aid digestion. They exchanged a few pleasantries. Suddenly, the red-wined commander stopped in his tracks, turned around, and stared directly at Lin Yi. His expression became serious. "We've gathered the coins. When can you deliver?" "Anytime." Lin Yi replied confidently, and as soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand elegantly, and a sack of potatoes appeared out of thin air in front of them. Your ability is truly extraordinary." The red-wined commander's eyes sparkled with a glint, uncertain whether it was admiration for Lin Yi's summoning ability or his agricultural ability. Then he gestured, "Let's go to the warehouse to complete the transaction." Lin Yi nodded and continued walking forward with his counterpart. Along the way, Lin Yi noticed that almost no soldiers or civilians in the town were wearing professional gear. Curious, he couldn't help but ask, "Doesn't your camp have professionals?" The red-wined commander frowned, looking confused. "You mean people with special abilities?" "Ah, we call them system users here." The commander smiled, his tone a bit complex. "Our soldiers are used to using firearms, and few are willing to fight zombies with just a baseball bat. So, almost all of the system users. Professionals are civilians we've recruited." Lin Yi raised an eyebrow. That was dangerous. However, this was ultimately a matter for their camp, and not something for him to worry about. At this moment, he was more interested in animal trading. I'd like to buy a hen and a rooster, each for 200 pounds of food. What do you think? I think the price is quite reasonable. After the deal was agreed upon, the two soon arrived in front of a refrigerated warehouse. A carriage filled with coins was already parked there, waiting quietly for them. Of course, besides the carriage, there were the previous 19 officers and plainclothes politician Gustav. Most of these people stared at Lin Yi with complex expressions, filled with both suspicion and anticipation. Now, they had slept, eaten, and been given face. It was indeed time for something real. Lin Yi looked around and joked, "Looks like you've brought a delegation." "They just don't trust you," the Red Wine Commander spoke frankly without taking sides, at least for now. Lin Yi merely chuckled and did not take those doubtful looks to heart. He walked calmly into the warehouse and waved his hand. In an instant, a flash of light filled the warehouse, and a large pile of sacks appeared out of nowhere. They were filled with potatoes, cabbages, carrots, onions, beets, and even garlic. Plainclothes politician Gustav was dumbfounded, excited, and stammered, "This is simply unbelievable." The Red Wine Commander was elated, smiling widely, extremely satisfied. "Ha ha ha. Great. Wonderful. Now, I should take these away." As Lin Yi spoke, he teleported the pile of coins on the carriage back to the shelter. The harvest was quite impressive, a total of 20,000 coins. At least, for now, everything was going smoothly. Until that dear politician, the plainclothes Gustav, once again prepared to cause trouble. Chapter 79, Kill Him to End All Troubles. Beauvais Town, inside the food warehouse. Lin Yi put away the money and looked directly at the Red Wine Commander. At this moment, the general's eyes sparkled with joy, excitement, and anticipation for the next supply. With this food, their situation could be greatly improved, and isn't every grand blueprint built brick by brick? Moreover, compared to this precious food, what they paid for it was nothing more than some previously idle, worthless gold coins. At this thought, the Red Wine Commander stepped forward, beaming, and said, "I look forward to establishing a fruitful partnership with you. And your next supply." As soon as these words were spoken, it was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, instantly causing ripples. The expressions of the officers present changed instantly. This was undoubtedly a strong signal. Lin Yi, in front of them, was no longer an insignificant outsider but a very important partner of the military. In an instant, those officers who already supported Lin Yi all broke into happy smiles. The remaining officers, however, showed dissatisfaction, glaring at Lin Yi with hostility and suspicion in their eyes. Lin Yi had already anticipated this, and was not surprised. He remained calm, slightly turned his head toward the Red Wine Commander, and smiled. "Do you have enough money to pay for the next shipment?" "I assure you, we will gather the money in 3 days." 3 days? The Red Wine Commander frowned upon hearing this. Obviously, he was pondering why the merchant set such a short deadline. However, as a consummate businessman, Lin Yi naturally had his own considerations for setting the time. He had already sensed that Beauvais Town was not united internally, with differing opinions and factional divisions. This internal discord undoubtedly posed many potential risks to their trade cooperation, such as someone secretly sabotaging the cooperation, disrupting the transaction process, or altering the cooperation agreement, making collaboration full of uncertainties. Therefore, from the perspective of reducing cooperation risks, shortening the transaction cycle was a wise choice. This could reduce uncertainties caused by the other party's internal conflicts, which is a reasonable business decision. But above all, it was not the main reason. Setting the next transaction within 3 days was a test of the Red Wine Commander's sincerity and decision-making ability in cooperation. If the Red Wine Commander could not overcome opposition within such a short time, gather the payment and facilitate the transaction, it would demonstrate his lack of sufficient authority and decision-making power in the camp. And for Lin Yi, an indecisive partner would greatly reduce the value of cooperation, making it logical to reconsider the partnership. Of course, Lin Yi would not say these things to the Red Wine Commander. However, the other party could probably speculate on it. Sure enough, after a brief pause and consideration, the Red Wine Commander Raphael solemnly nodded, his tone firm, and said, 3 days, then. Then I'll be off, I'll be back in 3 days. Lin Yi smiled, turned and walked towards the camp exit. No. You cannot leave. Just at this moment, the dear plainclothes politician Gustav finally jumped out. He had been secretly observing the Red Wine Commander's attitude, and when he saw that the latter agreed to the merchant's request and was ready to let the merchant leave. As a patriot, the anger in his heart instantly ignited to an extreme level. At his signal, another young officer jumped out. "General, we cannot let him go." "Why not?" the Red Wine Commander shouted angrily at the officer. Gustav spoke in a low tone. "He is the key to reviving our country, you must understand this." Therefore, we must not let him leave. As soon as the words fell, all the young officers stood up. Led by the plainclothes politician Gustav, they quickly blocked the warehouse exit, adopting a stance of resolutely not letting Lin Yi leave. Everyone held their breath, nerves taut, waiting silently for the general's response. Bang! Suddenly, the red-wined commander pulled out a gun, firing it into the sky, producing a warning gunshot. The sound was like thunder, accompanied by the red-wined commander's roar, echoing in the silent warehouse. Everyone back the hell off. If you mess this up and make him no longer do business with us, then what? Don't cause him trouble. He's under my protection. Bang! 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 4 more deafening gunshots echoed through the warehouse, causing the officers blocking the exit to instinctively take a step back. At this moment, everyone clearly understood the general's stance. He fully supported Lin Yi and would not allow anyone to be disrespectful or hinder him. Yet, the plainclothes politician was still unwilling, gritting his teeth, but we at least need to weigh the food to ensure he hasn't tricked. Lin Yi interrupted him directly, a trace of impatience in his tone. Are you done? I have a lot of things to do. Lin Yi, didn't you say you wanted to buy hens and roosters? We can go and have a look now. The red-wined commander spoke, though looking visibly uneasy. Lin Yi looked at the unfriendly faces glaring at him, smiling politely yet gracefully. Sure, but I won't stay here for more than a day. No problem. In the meantime, please allow me to show you around our town. The red-wined commander nodded, issuing several commands. Then, he led Lin Yi towards a jeep. The driver was a young officer. He saluted, started the engine, and delivered the passengers to their destination without waiting for the general to indicate where to go. It was an old military jeep, but it had additional armor. Clearly meant for transporting officers, as there wasn't even a place for a machine gun on it. I guess you were quite sure I wouldn't leave, or couldn't leave, right? Indeed, to be honest, I didn't expect you would decide to leave immediately, but even if you were to go, I expected Gustav wouldn't let you leave easily. The red-wined commander's expression was very honest, not hiding his thoughts, though there was a hint of embarrassment in his words. Lin Yi also explained candidly, well, anyway, I'm leaving tomorrow. And the way I leave will determine whether I'll come back. Currently, he had gained considerable insight into Beauvais town, and whether to continue business dealings ultimately depended on the general's performance. If the general could properly handle internal conflicts, showing sincerity and capability, then cooperation might continue, otherwise, he might reconsider the necessity of the partnership. I understand. The red-wined commander sighed deeply, holding his forehead, knowing this would be a challenging day for the future of the camp's development. After all, surrounded by officers who were all idiots. The jeep didn't drive fast, and Lin Yi indirectly learned the identity of the plainclothes politician Gustav. This guy was the former deputy minister of the economy in this region, and before the apocalypse, an emergency bill was passed, specifying who would manage the country if high-ranking officials died. The red-wined commander looked gloomy. Gustav is ranked 40 on the succession list. So he's your superior? Theoretically, yes. It was evident that the red-wine commander had been holding back for a long time, beginning to complain. Initially, Gustav was not in Beauvais town when the red-wine commander encountered him. He was living a life of luxury with some police officers and a small military detachment acting as his thugs. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens were struggling to survive, starving, fighting internally, and threatened by zombies. But due to orders, the red-wine commander had no choice but to incorporate his men into his own forces. Soon after, Beauvais town erupted in a power struggle. Gustav dreamed of overthrowing the red-wine commander, but he was smart enough to know that without the red-wine commander, the whole place would fall apart. Therefore, Gustav and his officers obtained ranks through bribery, surviving by using those uniforms, while drawing in the remaining police and military. When talking about this, the red-wine commander sighed, clearly exasperated with handling the situation. After listening, Lin Yi smiled and suddenly asked, "Can't you eliminate him, once and for all?" Chapter 80, He loves soldiers more than the general. Beauvais town, the chicken coop. From a distance, it looks less like a poultry farm and more like a heavily guarded prison. Tall metal fences surround it, with barbed wire coiled at the top, while security personnel patrol back and forth around the chicken coop, their eyes vigilant. Inside the fences, chickens stroll leisurely, while outside the fences, groups of starving people beg for food. These people, knowing well they won't get the chickens, can't help but keep staring, practically going crazy with desire. Lin Yi looked at the red-wine commander. It seems the food situation here is not very optimistic. How should I put it? The food you brought can be said to have saved the lives of most people in the camp, the red-wine commander sighed, very candidly. The Beauvais town camp, despite having a chicken coop, hunters, fishermen, and team searching for food in areas inaccessible to zombies, still faces food distribution challenges. After excluding privilege factors, food is supplied first to the soldiers, then to the workers, and even so, there has long been a food shortage. Here, it's not a case of not working, not eating. Even if you work hard, you might not eat. The key is, you can't afford not to work. If you don't work today, you might lose your job tomorrow and your life the day after. Therefore, no one dares to gamble. But with no one gambling, the food available for distribution just keeps decreasing, turning into a vicious cycle. At this moment, the door of the chicken coop slowly opened, and a jeep drove inside the coop. This is a small poultry farm, housing a few hundred chickens, equipped with its own diesel generator to ensure a basic power supply. The chickens here are not usually slaughtered for meat. People place more value on letting the flock reproduce. Moreover, only under special circumstances would some eggs be taken out of the cold storage for consumption. Lin Yi was fortunate to have scrambled eggs in the morning. The Red Wine Commander took him around the farm, showing him where the eggs are hatched, how the flocks are cared for, and what they are fed. The Red Wine Commander even introduced Lin Yi to the farm's former owner, Jerome, an elderly man, who is now the camp's chief livestock expert. At the moment, Jerome is training new employees, ready to roll up his sleeves and get to work. Can I chat with Jerome for a bit? I want him to teach me some insights, which I can then pass on to my people. Well, the general was about to refuse, but Lin Yi interrupted him. In exchange, I'll pay for the chickens with wheat. You'll be surprised. As Lin Yi spoke, he suddenly produced several bundles of golden, plump wheat. The food from the shelter is not only beneficial for humans, but its effects on animals are also magical, just like this wheat. So you really do have wheat. The Red Wine Commander's eyes flashed with shock upon seeing the wheat. After all, in this chaotic post-apocalyptic world, many merchants like to boast about their resources, exaggerating, while often engaging in deceitful practices. Through this matter, the Red Wine Commander realized another side of Lin Yi's character. Honesty. He took the wheat, examined it carefully, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Jerome will take over and entertain you for a while. 10 minutes later, Lin Yi arrived at the chicken coop. He knew nothing about chickens but insisted on personally selecting the hens and roosters. Based on Melanie's report, Lin Yi pointed to the two chickens with the highest heat in the coop. This gave Jerome quite a shock. You have quite a knife for picking chickens. This hen lays a lot of eggs, and this rooster is very lively, you know what I mean. Jerome, amicable in demeanor, handed the chickens to his guest. Lin Yi casually sent the chickens to the shelter, then humbly began learning techniques from the planting expert. Meanwhile, a few girls at the shelter sat in front of laptops, listening intently and taking notes. Lin Yi didn't plan to personally take care of these chickens, so this explanation was mainly for the girls to hear. Time quietly slipped away in focused study, and before they knew it, it was time for lunch. The Red Wine Commander came to invite Lin Yi for lunch. They boarded the jeep and, along the familiar road, smoothly returned to headquarters. At the factory gate, there were still many hungry people, but they only shouted, never daring to take any extreme actions. Walking into the officers' mess, Lin Yi found it more crowded than usual, filled with a tempting aroma. The Red Wine Commander warmly invited Lin Yi to sit and cheerfully said, today's lunch, we're eating the food you sold us. Oh, aren't you afraid the food might be poisoned or something? Dimar proudly declared, you're underestimating the chefs of our army. Each chef is also an excellent chemist. In short, no one can poison the French army. As soon as he finished speaking, all the officers raised their hands in unison, loudly agreeing. This sudden scene of intense enthusiasm, Lin Yi had seen it many times. This is the French army, suddenly giving you a burst of passion, with no warning. To put it bluntly, they are a group of creatures with extremely low ignition points. Soon after, lunch was served. The table was filled with several dishes carefully prepared with potatoes and vegetables, as well as a cabbage salad. Just like in the morning, everything was delicious, proving that the chefs here truly have some skills. Lin Yi ate with gusto, thoroughly enjoying himself. The Red Wine Commander did the same, having not tasted such fresh produce in an exceptionally long time. In the past, even when food supplies were relatively ample, most were preserved foods, canned goods, and such, which were repetitive day after day. Now, faced with this fresh food, the Red Wine Commander ate with particular focus, finishing every bite and even shamelessly licking the plate. Everyone thoroughly enjoyed lunch. Many wanted a second helping but were refused. After all, the current food reserves are far from enough to supply everyone. Most officers and soldiers didn't complain. They had all heard that an Eastern merchant brought abundant fresh food to the army, asking only for those worthless survivor coins in return. Does this act seem foolish? Others might not understand, but they certainly didn't see it that way. In this apocalyptic world, overshadowed by despair and fear, where resources are extremely scarce, food is the guarantee of life, and every bite is extraordinarily precious. Lin Yi's arrival was like a ray of light piercing the darkness, bringing unimaginably abundant food. They had no comprehension of the convoluted transactions up above. In their eyes, Lin Yi was simply the one who directly brought food to their faces. Even more incredibly, Lin Yi didn't ask for any scarce materials, nor did he covet gold or silver treasures. He merely took away those survivor coins, piled high and virtually useless in this post-apocalypse. This is the kind of care for the troops that surpasses even the general. Additionally, an uplifting message quickly spread through the mess hall. It's said that in 3 days, the merchant will bring another batch of even more abundant supplies. Not only meat and flour but also fresh fruits, which are extremely rare in the apocalypse. This news was like a bombshell, instantly causing an uproar amongst the crowd. Everyone was filled with surprise and anticipation. After lunch ended, the enthusiastic atmosphere in the mess hall remained. Many officers, whom Lin Yi had never met, all stopped afterward, turned uniformly, and directed their eyes toward where Lin Yi was standing. Immediately following, they stood tall and in a unified motion raised their right hands, giving Lin Yi a standard French military salute. After the salute, they hurriedly and with barely contained excitement, slowly left the mess hall. Chapter 81, The Nation in Peril. Beauvais Town, Camp Exit. Red Wine Commander wore a complex expression on his face and carefully looked at his guest asking, "Lin Yi, are you planning to go back to Paris now?" "Yes, what's up?" "We are currently recruiting and training staff and plan to start attacking Paris in 2 weeks. We could take you along." After considering for a while, Lin Yi regretfully said, "The timing might not work. Paris City is currently surrounded by an impenetrable circle of zombies, and the tunnel you came through is now inaccessible. Wouldn't leaving now be too risky?" Red Wine Commander's expression clearly carried some frustration, as if he was feeling heavy-hearted. Lin Yi smiled. In fact, General Raphael wasn't bad, and he was willing to chat with him a bit longer. But personal ties are personal ties, business strategy is another matter, so he had to say goodbye. "I still want to check out the tunnel." "Then I'll have my deputy Yak escort you." 10 minutes later, an armored jeep slowly drove out of the small town. Outside the car window, scenery sped by, yet the atmosphere inside was somewhat quiet. Suddenly, Yak broke the silence and said, "It's wise for you to leave early. I don't fear trouble, but I try to avoid it. It makes doing business a bit easier." Lin Yi looked out the window, responding calmly. This route was patrolled by soldiers, so there were no zombies. Most vehicles had also been cleared away. In fact, they were pushed aside by tanks. Lin Yi secretly marveled, never imagining that Beauvais Town's camp actually had tanks. The jeep soon reached its destination. That pharmaceutical company's warehouse had been abandoned even before the apocalypse, and all useful things inside had long been taken away, leaving only an empty shell. The tunnel was still sealed. "Our people have evacuated this area, so if you see any soldiers here, they are definitely enemies." Yak finished speaking, solemnly saluted, and then quickly turned and left. Lin Yi quietly watched the jeep gradually drive away until it disappeared at the horizon. Only then did he slightly lower his head, speaking into the earpiece, "Melanie, it's time to start." "Understood, boss." Lin Yi walked towards the warehouse. Along the way, it was eerily quiet around him. There was no sign of zombies or any other people. At first glance, the area seemed deserted. But this was just a surface appearance. Melanie quickly noticed something was off. "Boss, just as you thought, there's an ambush here, but they seem to be waiting for something. They obviously think I can open the tunnel." Lin Yi chuckled softly as he walked into the warehouse. He had long guessed that dear plainclothes politician Gustav would certainly appear here. But it seems this coward brought along 6 soldiers and an officer. Lin Yi stood in front of the closed tunnel entrance, intently staring at it, pondering how to open it. The tunnel entrance looked like an ordinary reinforced concrete wall, without any openings or hidden components. Even old Mark didn't know how to open it, and even Melanie's camera with the X-ray vision mode couldn't find anything resembling a terminal or button. "So, using this route to get back to Paris isn't feasible, huh?" Lin Yi's face didn't show any particular disappointment. After all, he escaped out. Who knows what could happen in there? What if it's filled with chimpanzees inside? Not to mention those strange tentacles. "Boss, this wall is reinforced with steel, even a tank might not be able to break through it. What are those ambushers doing? They probably thought you'd open the door." "Hey, it's not just them who think that." Lin Yi chuckled softly, walking towards the exit, then turned a corner and instantly vanished. 10 minutes earlier, from the ambusher's perspective, "The target is approaching, sir." A soldier ambushing in the dark lowered his voice, reporting to the officer through the walkie-talkie, with a hint of tension and excitement in his tone. Good, good. Everyone, take your positions and follow my command. Gustav's voice came through the walkie-talkie with a touch of urgency and greed. When he realized that this foreign businessman wasn't planning to stay another night in town, he quickly adjusted his plan. In his guess, Lin Yi would definitely open the tunnel and then enter Paris through it. However, he won't go back. According to his meticulously planned-out strategy, the great Gustav, along with his foolish soldiers, would capture this extremely arrogant businessman Lin Yi and hide him in a safe place. Then, the system user with skills would take over the subsequent arrangements and start working towards the predetermined goal. I see the target. Confirmed, the target is alone, unarmed. An officer sternly shouted, he has the ability to summon objects, so don't think he's a harmless piglet. Understood, the soldiers replied one after another. As time ticked by, the atmosphere grew more and more tense. Suddenly, there was a cry of shock through the walkie-talkie, the target has disappeared. The target vanished into thin air. How is that possible? Everyone, go find him. Gustav's voice suddenly rose several octaves, filled with anger. But sir, this might be a trap. I don't care. The fate of the country is at stake. The soldiers, helpless, could only leave their hiding spots and head towards where Lin Yi was last seen. One soldier speculated, maybe he has a skill that allows him to turn invisible. Find him. The fate of the country is at stake. Gustav kept urging through the walkie-talkie. Among the 7 soldiers, 5 of them quickly ran to where Lin Yi had just been, trying to find his trace. They searched for a long time but found nothing. The other 2 searched around the perimeter but also found nothing. Suddenly, a man appeared behind the squad. It was Lin Yi. He crouched down, holding a grenade without a pin, an evil smile on his face. He carefully placed the grenade on the ground and then immediately teleported to the shelter. His arrogant move was not unnoticed, but by the time the soldiers noticed the grenade, it was already too late. Boom. An explosion sounded, and 5 nationalist soldiers instantly turned into a pink mist. Fortunately, before the explosion happened, Lin Yi had covered Melanie's eyes. This black girl surely didn't want to see the scene of living people getting blown into bits. After teleporting back to reality, Lin Yi collected the intact guns, cleaned up the bodies, and then disappeared again. When the soldiers searching the perimeter heard the explosion, they immediately ran towards the explosion site with panicked expressions. One soldier said in horror, "What happened here? Where did everyone go? There's blood everywhere, but no bodies. I tried using the walkie-talkie, but they didn't respond. I feel something bad is happening." Another soldier said, his voice trembling. The soldiers nervously searched the area, but neither the enemy nor the bodies of their comrades were found. There are fragments here. It must be a trap. We need to retreat. As soon as the soldiers turned around, Lin Yi's figure reappeared behind them. The sword in his hand flashed coldly, and 2 bodies fell to the ground but were quickly collected and sent back to the shelter for processing. Then thrown into the pit. Chapter 82, The Rooster becomes the leader of the rabbit's pharmaceutical warehouse, surrounded by forest. After taking care of a few patrolling soldiers, Lin Yi scanned the surroundings with hawk-like eyes. Determined to root out the big rat hiding in the dark, he asked softly, "Melanie, where are their vehicles hidden?" "Just ahead in the forest, it's a military jeep." "Got it." Lin Yi stealthily crept into the forest and indeed found 2 military jeeps cleverly disguised. One was equipped with a heavy machine gun, well supplied with ammunition, obviously for fire support. The other was an armored vehicle, clearly the officer's ride. Unfortunately, the clever Gus had already left the vehicle, having fled away. Lin Yi didn't dwell on it much, after all, the days are long, there's plenty of time to deal with him. With a wave of his hand, he pocketed both jeeps and swiftly returned to the shelter. In the shelter, Chen Yui had already been waiting for a long time. She held a steaming cup of coffee and a perfectly toasted slice of bread. Lin Yi took it, found a lounge chair, and sat down comfortably, letting out a long sigh. "Let me rest for a while." "Okay, boss." Chen Yui, like a loyal sentinel, stood quietly by his side, ensuring no one disturbed his rest. During this time, no matter who came looking for the boss, she would send them and their problems away. After half an hour, Lin Yi finally regained his energy. He drank the 3rd cup of coffee, swallowed the toast, and suddenly frowned. Where did this bread come from? When he was eating, he hadn't reacted, but now this thought struck him like lightning. Chen Yui smiled slightly and explained, "There are still hundreds of idle people in the shelter. I had them separate the grains from the wheat spikes and grind them into flour. Although the flour is still quite coarse, at least it solves an urgent need." "Very good, Chen Yui." Lin Yi's eyes flashed with appreciation. From now on, You officially become my second in command." He liked such proactive employees. Not only can they understand the boss's intentions, but they also strive to work before the boss even asks. "Thank you, boss." Chen Yui was overjoyed. Although she previously had significant power and respect, she didn't have an official title, so it was inevitably difficult to arrange some matters. Now, with the boss's clear authorization, everything changed. More importantly, she was once again certain that the boss trusted and recognized her. That made her happier than anything she could have gained. Lin Yi's gaze inadvertently fell on Chen Yui's head, noticing that not only was she wearing several bandages, but there were also a few feathers stuck in her hair, looking somewhat disheveled. Chen Yui obviously realized the boss was looking at her, and explained gloomily. "That new rooster is simply a wife protector. Whoever it sees approaching the hens to feed them will be pecked hard. The girls are all injured. Wasn't that girl Annie claiming to have farming experience? Even studying for a few hours with Jerome? She's only ever raised pet pigs before, never seen such a situation. She's the most injured. Then, how are the chickens now?" They ran to the rabbit cage. "Rabbits?" Lin Yi was speechless. "The rabbits will eat the chickens. Those rabbits are like a machine of infinite feeding and breeding. Having chickens and rabbits together is just asking for trouble, right? By now, they might have already been gnawed clean." Seeing Lin Yi's helpless expression, Chen Yui blinked. "No worries, that rooster scared all the rabbits away, now it's the boss of the rabbit cage." Lin Yi's jaw dropped, and he got up to head towards the farming area. In the rabbit cage, there were about 100 rabbits, each big and fat, and in a few days, they could presumably be slaughtered. And in the middle of the cage, was a small earthen mound with a large nest made of straw. In the nest, were the rooster and its wife. The rooster proudly and domineeringly stood, and when rabbits passed by, they would let their ears hang down and slow their pace. Some rabbits even brought food to their new leader and then ran away. The rooster stood on the high mound, and the rabbits would lower their heads upon seeing it. A single order and they would all perk up, obedient and worry-free. Lin Yi looked at this absurd scene and couldn't help but ask Chen Yui, "Where did that nest come from?" "The rabbits built it." Chen Yui looked at the beautiful nest and awkwardly smiled. "By the way, the hen has already laid its first egg. I thought that after moving to a new place, they would stop laying eggs due to excessive stress." Lin Yi looked at the comfortable nest and the two satisfied chickens. "Seems I was overthinking it. Currently, these two chickens no longer need humans to feed them, as the rabbit minions would occasionally offer food. But if anyone got too close, the hen would cluck, and then the rooster would glare fiercely at the person." On the way back to the room, Chen Yui reported the issues that needed urgent solutions in the camp these past few days. First up was the problem of idle personnel. There were many employees' families, who had labor capacity but no corresponding work. In the long term, this wouldn't be a good thing for either the personnel's mindset or the shelter's order. Next was the order management issue in the shelter. According to Solomon's suggestion, he needed an office and a prison with a detention center. Chen Yui reported various conditions one after another, mostly just conveying them. Lin Yi pondered for a moment and decided to handle the issues uniformly, inform Solomon, the professor, Regina and Louis, as well as Oriana and Natasha, to come see me after breakfast tomorrow. "Understood, boss." Chen Yui quickly nodded and then went off to carry out Lin Yi's command. Currently, the shelter's funds should be relatively sufficient, allowing for an expansion. Back at his residence, Lin Yi still felt a bit tired but forced himself to work nonetheless. What he needed to do was to check his spoils. This time, he killed a zombie and obtained 24 white eggs, 3 green eggs, and 1 blue egg. After washing his hands, Lin Yi clasped his hands together, just about to say a prayer, but found it inappropriate. So he made the sign of the cross 3 times in front of his chest, prayed for good luck, and then was ready to start drawing prizes from the white eggs. He didn't like gambling nor relying on luck. He wasn't particularly unlucky, but he couldn't say he was very lucky either. Alright, the first one. Got it. A level 2 sword, and it's quite decent. Empty, empty, empty. Empty, empty, empty? Such a streak of bad luck made Lin Yi realize something was wrong. It seemed that today the goddess of luck was not on his side, so he prepared to put aside the other rewards for now. However, his good mood was already gone. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Lin Yi, still half asleep, opened the door, seeing Chen Yui standing there in only a nightgown. Barefoot, looking a bit uneasy. Chapter 83, The Shelter's second in command. The cabin was filled with the scent of hormones. Lin Yi was still in a half-asleep state, his consciousness not fully back. Chen Yui quietly slipped into the room. Her cheeks were slightly flushed with a touch of shyness as she slowly took off her clothes. She then gently lay down on the bed, pulling the blanket over her body, and shyly glanced at Lin Yi. That glance was like a gentle spring breeze, instantly igniting Lin Yi's instincts. The remnants of his drowsiness vanished instantly. Lin Yi lifted the blanket, his gaze lingering on the young woman's graceful figure. The long-suppressed impulse within him surged like a breaking dam. Chen Yuiu, this wise woman, understood Lin Yi better than anyone else in the shelter. Coupled with her unique mind-reading ability, she could always precisely sense when he needed to release emotions. The next morning, sunlight had already filled the entire shelter. Chen Yuiu, as usual, gently woke Lin Yi, then bit her lip and ran out to prepare breakfast. Now, Solomon's wife served as the cook in the shelter. With a stable life, she was no longer skin and bones and got along very well with Chen Yuiu. Breakfast was quite hearty, with potatoes, vegetables, and even pancakes. The jam Lin Yi robbed from the blue-haired gang was surprisingly abundant, enough to last everyone for a year and a half. Lin Yi stuffed the seventh pancake into his mouth, his cheeks bulging as he mumbled, "It would be great if the pancakes had meat in them. I really want meat too. I feel like I'm turning into a vegetarian." Annie was as energetic as ever, saying this while gulping down the canned meat on the table, as if she hadn't eaten in days. "Boss, can we slaughter our bunnies now?" Annie suddenly looked up, eagerly watching Lin Yi. Hearing this, Lin Yi glared at her. This girl had previously exclaimed that rabbits were cute and shouldn't be killed. The speed of her change of heart was faster than flipping a book. However, the rabbits were mostly grown up and it was indeed time to harvest them. Lin Yi turned to Chen Yuiu. "Do we have a butcher in the shelter?" "Yes, there's one who is an expert in this trade before the apocalypse, and another who is a coach at the Hunter Club. Butchering should be no problem for him either." Lin Yi nodded satisfactorily. With professionals, things would be easier. Later, these two could train a batch of related personnel, some responsible for slaughtering, others for cleaning organs and such. Oh yes, and the animal skins. These rabbits were big and round, their fur could be turned into warm rabbit fur coats and processed into soft blankets and a series of practical items. "I want one." Annie's eyes lit up like two stars upon hearing about rabbit fur coats. But before long, her eyes dimmed down, mumbling softly, "Poor bunnies have to suffer. Poor bunnies have to suffer." Lin Yi really didn't want to bother with this temperamental girl and instead considered her to find a batch of people skilled in leather processing. After breakfast, he kept Solomon, Chen Yuiu, Louis, the professor, Oriana, and Natasha behind. "I'm here, boss." As soon as Lin Yi thought of Regina, she appeared like a gust of wind. Recently, this beautiful and lovely girl's health had been recovering very well. The bruises and scrapes on her body had long disappeared, and with good food and rest, she was glowing and her figure was as eye-catching as that of a Victoria's Secret model. Once everyone had arrived, Lin Yi felt it was time to talk with them about recent plans. First of all, the area of the shelter must be redivided. Apart from considering the future expansion of residential areas, an industrial area needed to be planned. Although currently, the only predictable industry involved is the processing of meat and animal hides. Nevertheless, as the shelter rapidly develops, it won't be long before a series of industrial projects will be introduced one after another. Therefore, everything must be planned in advance. Secondly, there was the construction of the power system and infrastructure. With the gradual establishment of industry and the regularization of shelter operations, many formerly unimaginable facilities that can improve employees' quality of life must also be realized. This is vital for enhancing the residents' sense of belonging to the shelter, especially those warriors fighting life and death out there. Lastly, there was the issue of distributing equipment. Workers need tools, fighters need weapons, and everyone's proficiency with certain items needs detailed statistics. After Lin Yi finished speaking, he clapped his hands, and everyone's spirits perked up. "I hereby appoint Chen Yuiu as the second in command of the shelter. When I'm not around, she's in charge of solving any issues, and you all have to listen to her, understand?" After speaking, a message appeared before Chen Yuiu. "You have been assigned a new job, second in command. As the second in command of the shelter, you are allowed to transport individuals who violate or are suspected of violating rules, temporarily restrict others' privileges, access the map drawing and planning functions, assigned personnel to the following jobs: farm workers, meat processors, soldiers. Important privilege, access the store in read-only mode." Looking at the message before her, Chen Yuiu's eyes instantly welled up with tears of emotion. "Boss, thank you." Her voice was choked, with so much she wanted to say but too overwhelmed to articulate. She could only nod continuously amidst the envious gazes of everyone else. Lin Yi smiled at her, gesturing for her to sit down. Then he turned to his chief commander and asked, "How are the warriors doing with their training? How was the experience gained last time?" "Boss, thanks to your discovery of that bug, all warriors have reached level 1, with 11 of them advancing to level 2. Solomon beamed with joy. "He's Lin Yi's trusted foundation, and the warriors are his cornerstone." By training the soldiers well, he could showcase his value in front of Lin Yi. Lin Yi nodded, feeling quite satisfied with the results. After contemplating for a moment, he suddenly had a bright idea and asked, what rewards did they receive? 25 received skills, 12 obtained level 1 and level 2 equipment, and the rest got nothing. Give me a list of their skills. Understood, boss. Skills are a valuable asset. Lin Yi remembered his second skill. Combat reflex. Of course, aside from combat skills, there are numerous special skills with varied uses that, if allocated wisely, might yield unexpected effects. After issuing the orders, Lin Yi began expanding the shelter. He bought new fields and fences and expanded the rabbit farming area fourfold. From 600 square yards to 2,400 square yards. The male rabbits were like tireless motors, spending their days breeding future generations and eating. Rabbit reproduction was astonishingly fast. On average, a rabbit requires about 10 square yards of space. Thus, the new fence could accommodate about 2,500 rabbits. Each rabbit reaches slaughter weight in about 5 days after birth, yielding about 20 to 25 pounds of meat. Next, Lin Yi opened up a 70,000 square yard potato plantation, equivalent to about 10 large fields. The construction of these facilities cost him a total of 3,200 coins, not including the cellar that needed to be expanded soon. The current cellar could only accommodate 500 tons, and 30% of the space was already occupied. To upgrade it would cost another 10,000 coins, which was heart-wrenching. Boss, regarding that soldier, how should we handle him? Solomon suddenly stepped forward, breaking the brief silence. Lin Yi was taken aback, having been so deep in thought that he hadn't noticed Solomon approach him. Chapter 84, Corpses come to the shelter inside the shelter. With Solomon's reminder, Lin Yi suddenly recalled the matter of that soldier. Last time when they were grinding for experience points, they found a surviving soldier under a jeep. Lin Yi originally planned to send him to the business building camp or the Louvre, but fate had other plans. Now he finds himself outside Paris City. Where did you keep him? I had someone build a small shack in the forest as a temporary prison and kept him there. That's a good arrangement. I'll release him once I return to Paris. Lin Yi was just about to turn around and leave when he suddenly heard an urgent shout. The one shouting was a warrior from the shelter, who was seen running quickly toward him, sweating heavily and panting. Boss. Commander, we have trouble. What's the matter? Solomon frowned, a sense of foreboding rising within him. The soldier shouted in panic, zombies. Zombies are emerging from the fog. Where? Over there. Lin Yi looked toward the distant south of the forest, and a glint of light flashed in his calm eyes. The warrior was astonished, not understanding how the boss knew without him pointing it out, but he still nodded hurriedly. Yes. Over there. Space-time invasion. Or rather, a space-time fragment invasion of the shelter. Long before, he discussed this with the old professor. The shelter's unique space-time coordinates would inevitably attract zombies from other space-time fragment worlds. These creatures would frantically invade the shelter, plundering everything they needed. As a precaution, he had already asked someone to build an iron wire fence on the outermost perimeter of the shelter, serving as a defensive line to warn intruders. Now it seems, this brutal battle is about to begin. At this moment, Solomon was still struggling to react. Following the boss's gaze, he could only see a blurry scene. Nonetheless, it didn't affect him from fulfilling his duty. He decisively ordered the reporting soldier, gather the men. The boss and I are on our way. Yes. When Lin Yi and Solomon reached the scene, 3 ordinary zombies were clawing at the iron wire fence in anger and frustration. A group of residents, panicked and confused, were running around nearby, their faces full of worry and fear. Lin Yi stared intently at the zombies pawing at the iron wire, silently contemplating. From a broad perspective, the shelter seems to have drifted to a certain part of the sea of space-time. And here, there happen to be space-time fragments, in other words, fragments of other worlds. That's why zombies from that world invaded the shelter. Lin Yi slowly took a few steps forward. A zombie, seeing someone approach, became even more frenzied. It roared, desperately stretching its rotten fingers through the fence gaps. No matter how hard it tried, it couldn't reach the fresh food before it. It became more furious, shaking the fence wildly, yet the fence stood firm, unmoved. Lin Yi flipped his hand, and a black sword instantly appeared in his grip. His movements were fluid as he stabbed the sword accurately into the zombie's eye. You killed a level 1 zombie, received 1 experience point and 1 survivor coin. Lin Yi was slightly taken aback, not expecting that these zombies would drop experience points and coins. Then, could there also be other loot, like the reward egg? A moment later, Lin Yi's mind was rapidly calculating. If more zombies appeared in the shelter, under organized and disciplined defense, could killing them earn more coins? This could be an additional source of income. The only risk might be strong mutant zombies, but if defensive facilities could be purchased at the store, it should enable a positive cycle through fighting. First, invest, then profit, without losses. Suddenly, another idea flashed in Lin Yi's mind, and he turned to instruct, "Help me get Melanie over here." "Yes, boss." Solomon saw the boss constantly inspecting the remaining 2 zombies and didn't dare delay, immediately running towards the camp. Soon after, Melanie arrived in a hurry. Before leaving her monitoring post, she specifically asked Xiaoxuan to take over for her. Arriving at the edge of the shelter, she saw the crowd and soldiers talking in low voices, looking tense. Her heart was full of doubts, but after squeezing through the crowd and seeing those terrifying zombies, she was immediately stunned. Melanie took a step back. "Zombies? Don't worry, they're behind the fence." Lin Yi's gentle voice pulled the girl back from her panic. With a little black girl leading, he walked a few steps forward, stopping not far from the zombies. Melanie looked closely, confirming that the zombies couldn't currently break through the fence and pose no significant threat. Then, she gathered her courage to move a little closer. Lin Yi handed her the black one-handed sword in his hand, pointing to a thin zombie whose face was nearly devoured. "Use this, stab the zombie in the neck, eyes, or temple, just make sure to take it down." "But Melanie stuttered as she took the sword, beads of cold sweat forming on her forehead. Just standing there was already terrifying beyond her limits. Although she was a monitor, seeing zombies on a screen was entirely different from seeing them in person. Facing the virtual zombies in movies or games was nothing compared to the horror in reality. Thinking so, then looking at the zombies' lifeless eyes, listening to their nauseating noises, smelling their decaying stench. Suddenly, her stomach churned. Lin Yi stepped forward and patted her shoulder, smiling encouragingly. "Don't worry, they can't hurt you. With me here, isn't that reassuring enough?" "All right." Encouraged by the boss's confidence, Melanie hesitated for a moment and finally mustered the courage to step forward. She took a deep breath, mimicking a female warrior in movies, raised the sword high, and slashed down heavily. Thud. Melanie used all her strength, but the sword couldn't completely chop off the zombie's head, merely getting stuck in the middle of its skull. The zombie was not only still alive but was also infuriated, shaking its pus-oozing head even more wildly. Melanie's hands started trembling, barely able to hold on to the sword. "Push it back and forth forcefully, and you'll hit its brain, just a bit more." Lin Yi didn't step in to help because he knew that once he acted, the experience gained from the girl killing the zombie would be divided with him. Melanie gritted her teeth, summoned her courage, and pushed the sword forcefully, making the zombie emit a miserable cry before collapsing dead. The sword was stuck on the fence, its blade dripping with blood and brain matter, a sight that made Melanie vomit on the spot. Lin Yi handed Melanie a bottle of spring water. "Good job, here, rinse your mouth." "Thank you." The little black girl took a sip, spit it out, and then rinsed her mouth. "Did you gain experience?" "Yes. Now I'm a level 1 professional and gained a skill." Melanie looked at Lin Yi gratefully, proudly announcing. Chapter 85, Construction of Inner and Outer Walls Inside the Shelter. Melanie, the little black-haired girl, was brimming with excitement, her voice quivering slightly from the thrill. "I gained the Hawkeye skill, which allows me to see further and clearer, and notice more details." Lin Yi couldn't help but burst into laughter upon hearing this. This girl really has a knack for surveillance. She might end up sitting in front of a laptop all day. At this moment, there was only one last zombie left outside the fence. Lin Yi looked at the crowd behind him and shouted, "Who wants to give it a try?" Such opportunities are rare. However, everyone was timid and hesitant, with no one daring to respond or step forward. Most people here were relatives of warriors or young girls without the strength to even truss a chicken. They were full of fear towards the zombies and didn't even dare to get a little closer. Just when things were getting awkward, a girl stepped out from the crowd. She looked very cute and was one of the survivors liberated from the feminist camp. She bit her lower lip slightly, her voice tinged with tension and hesitation. "Do it." "Great, I admire your courage." Lin Yi smiled warmly and handed the sword to the girl. He gently encouraged, "Don't worry, I'll be with you all the way." The cute girl nodded vigorously, took a deep breath, and walked to the edge of the fence. "Ah!" The last zombie seemed to sense danger, frantically shaking the fence. It bit onto the wire with its pus-filled teeth, letting out a spine-chilling howl. "Ah!" The girl's panic caused her to lose her grip, dropping the sword in fright at this sudden frenzy. Lin Yi's quick reflexes saved the day, catching the sword precisely before it could slash the girl's leg. Seeing the girl's frightened pale face, he smiled and softly reassured, "Don't be scared. Look, it can't even get past the fence, it can't harm you at all." The cute girl exhaled heavily, steadied herself, and looked up, her eyes full of gratitude towards Lin Yi. After joining the shelter, she had mostly been in contact with Chen Yuyu and others daily. This mysterious boss in front of her, she rarely even got a chance to see him up close, let alone talk to him. Unexpectedly, the boss was really as gentle as the other girls had said. Want to give it another try? Lin Yi encouraged. Yeah, I can do it. The cute girl straightened her body and took the sword from the boss. She approached the fence again, staring intently at the half-decayed eyeball of the zombie. Her gaze grew determined, then she raised the sword high and thrust it in with all her might. With a soft splat, the zombie fell to the ground lifelessly. Nicely done, Lin Yi praised, stepping forward to pull the sword stuck in the fence. At this moment, the girls seemed dazed, standing still in astonishment. The crowd grew tense, yet seeing Lin Yi's calm demeanor, they instinctively held their breath. Suddenly, the girl jumped up in excitement. A wheel appeared just now. I gained a skill. Her face was flushed, and she excitedly reported, this skill is called Banshee's Roar. It lets me emit high-density sound waves that can daze people around me. That's quite the skill. If you're interested in fighting, you can find Solomon. Of course, it's totally up to you. Of course, I'm willing. Before Lin Yi could finish, the girl vigorously nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. Then, as if remembering something, she shyly asked with a blushing face, boss. Can I fight alongside you in the future? There will be a chance, Lin Yi answered with a smile. Yay. The cute girl was over the moon. Lin Yi nodded, ready to arrange for the zombie's body to be moved. Just then, he received a prompt in his mind, the intruder has been repelled, the enemy's body is being reclaimed, you gain 30 points of biomass, for repelling the intruder, you received 3 survivor coins, sent directly to the warehouse. After receiving this information, Lin Yi looked up. He watched as the zombie's body ahead quietly melted into the ground like thawing snow. Seeing this, Lin Yi was very pleased. This saves a lot of hassle, no longer needing to send people to collect bodies and coins. With this matter resolved, Lin Yi returned to his laptop, beginning the task of strengthening the shelter's defense. Currently, the shop offered various defense structures to choose from, ranging from simple fences to sturdy reinforced concrete walls. Initially, he planned to have the warriors build simple outposts, but considering the residents' safety and future potential benefits, he opted for direct purchases. First, all the original wooden posts were replaced with thick and sturdy reinforced concrete pillars. The fence was raised to 3 meters, and the side and top wire netting was upgraded to more durable and flexible versions. Behind this fence, another wall, a 15-meter-high inner wall, was erected. Between the 2 walls, there were multiple zones. Watchtowers were built at the 4 corners, equipped with bright searchlights and gun mounts. Currently, there were only 2 guns, both salvaged from a previous military jeep. Once the fence wall was completed, the anxiety of the shelter's worker-class residents significantly eased. Solomon wasn't idle either. As soon as the fence was up, he arranged for the warriors to monitor the watchtowers day and night, and also set up patrols in all directions. The red-haired girl, Sylvie, was now managing the shelter's armory. Her main duties included weapon repair, arrow crafting, and distributing equipment. Through this period of busy work, she had leveled up to level 4. Every time she reported her work to Lin Yi, she would bounce around and often casually take the boss's afternoon snack. Lin Yi was quite helpless about this, only able to sip his bitter coffee while appreciating the pond view. Now, the pond had truly become a lake. At this moment, everyone was finished with farm work, with many strolling by the lake, swimming, or sunbathing. There was even someone fishing. But there weren't any fish there, to be precise, there were no living creatures in the magical lake water. What would happen if we put some fish in the lake? The magical lake water had unique healing properties, so if he bought some fish fry from the shop to put in, would it promote aquaculture? If it could really succeed, there would be a continuous supply of seafood to eat. What's happening there? Suddenly, Lin Yi noticed a long line forming by the public bathhouse. A group of women was gathered there, noisily discussing among themselves. Regina was in front, directing everyone. Please don't worry, we'll be distributing numbers. When it's your turn, you can go in. Please queue here for registration to get a number. Lin Yi approached her. Regina, is there a problem here? Boss? Upon seeing Lin Yi, Regina's pretty face lit up with a delighted smile. Everyone wants to shower, but there aren't enough bathrooms. Tell them that we'll start building houses and infrastructure in the coming days. Let them know not to worry too much and to bear with it for now. Understood, boss. Lin Yi was very satisfied with Regina's organizational skills, nodded, and turned to walk away. Boss. At this moment, a voice called out from a distance. Lin Yi stopped in his tracks, puzzled. He saw Solomon shouting while quickly running towards him. Boss. Another zombie has appeared, this time to the east. Chapter 86, Human Sterilization? Inside the shelter. Lin Yi listened to Solomon's report, his brow slightly furrowed. From the current situation, the zombie invasion from the other side of the space-time fragment seems to be more frequent. But as the boss, with numerous matters large and small to handle within the shelter, he couldn't constantly stay on the edge. Lin Yi's tone was unquestionable. Solomon, make sure to implement the countermeasures and quickly level up to 5. Can you do that? No problem, boss. Solomon pounded his chest enthusiastically before running off to carry out his tasks. He was still 40 experience points away from level 5, which meant he would have to stay up all night killing creatures to achieve his goal. Lin Yi returned to his residence, changed into his pajamas, and sat down heavily on the soft bed. Nowadays, the shelter has developed to the size of a small town, and it's really not easy to personally attend to every matter. However, as the various constructions gradually completed, a sense of achievement and security quietly spread in his heart, giving him much comfort. As he thought of this, Lin Yi's eyelids grew heavier, and he gradually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, sunlight poured into the room, shining on Chen Yui's pretty face, and she gently woke Lin Yi as usual. 20 minutes later, everyone gathered around to have breakfast. Lin Yi suddenly put down his fork and asked, "By the way, what's today's date?" "August 15th, it's already autumn." Annie giggled. Lin Yi looked around at everyone wearing short sleeves and suddenly realized that the weather in the shelter always felt like a warm and pleasant summer. He recalled there seemed to be some gadget in the store that could control the weather. At some point, he might buy it to try out and possibly bring some unique changes to the shelter. Lin Yi shifted the topic to work. "So, how is the planning of the shelter going?" "We've already divided Sanctuary Town into several zones and started planning the streets." The little Natasha, with bright, deer-like eyes, leaned next to Lin Yi and casually stuffed half of his food into his mouth. Then, she clutched Lin Yi's strong arm tightly with both hands, playfully pulling him over to a sketch. Lin Yi looked closely. It was a well-drafted and thought-provoking architectural plan. "I've been recommended by everyone, and now I'm Sanctuary's chief urban planner." Natasha blinked her big, bright eyes proudly at Lin Yi. She then pointed at the blueprint with her small hand, eagerly beginning her introduction. According to Natasha's plan, the entire shelter would be divided into 5 large areas centered on their current location. This way, Lin Yi could teleport to other areas more conveniently. Furthermore, all affairs could be centrally managed, greatly improving efficiency. Great. Lin Yi nodded in satisfaction, inconspicuously swallowing the last bite of food in his mouth. The boss's praise made the little Natasha burst with excitement. She stood on tiptoe and gently brushed away the food residue at the corner of Lin Yi's mouth with her little hand, then continued her presentation. The Southwest District will be Sanctuary Town's agricultural and military zone. Besides large tracts of farmland, there was plenty of open space, so the weaponry could be moved there, along with a garage. Later on, if they wanted to build a guard barracks, there would be enough construction space. The Northeast District is planned as a residential area, providing residents with a comfortable living environment. The Northwest District is designated as an industrial area and will support the shelter's future industrial development. The Southeast District is a lake and relaxation area, offering a place for people to unwind. Currently, the girls have not only designed the layout but have also listed other basic infrastructure construction plans. However, they've encountered some difficulties. The shelter's controlling laptop is the only one available, with only Chen Yuiu having access to view the upgrade options. If Chen Yuiu is busy or Lin Yi is out, Melanie monitors the computer. The girls can't conduct related work, so they resort to using pen and paper to simulate planning, which greatly decreases efficiency. As for the upgrade program, Lin Yi had plans for it earlier. He nodded and said, "I'll make some time to add a few laptops to the shelter." After he finished speaking, Lin Yi's gaze fell on the construction blueprint again, lingering over the residential area for a long time. "Is your design of the residential building 2 stories with 8 rooms?" "Yes, boss. From an economic standpoint, this is the most reasonable choice." Natasha responded seriously. According to her plan, Sanctuary Town would build several small communities, each equipped with its cafeteria, public bathroom, and restroom. Currently, 2 communities are planned, with 304 rooms each. For larger families, several rooms can be combined into one apartment to meet different residential needs. "All right, I have no objections." Lin Yi agreed. After a brief thought, he spoke. "Additionally, apart from accounting for daily necessities and appliances, we also need to add some beneficial entertainment facilities for the community." He certainly didn't want to treat people like cattle as in the Louvre, or like weapons as in the commercial building, nor like tools as in Beauvais Town. He recalled his years as a gang leader, where his subordinates had a strong sense of belonging to him. And this was not something that could be maintained by mere passion. After breakfast, Everyone went about their respective tasks. Lin Yi went to the laptop. Since the laboratory and then at Bovate Town, he hadn't checked notifications, and presumably, a lot had accumulated by now. Through the system's calculations, the damaged jeep, along with the hand grenade, machine guns, ammunition, and other items inside, resulted in a total of 266 experience points. And the medicines, chemicals, and medical equipment obtained from the lab were valued at 340 experience points. Regarding item reception, the shelter has received item, mobile server. Note, the server includes extensive research data and medical information, hence the rewarding grace. Your shelter has earned 1,000 experience points. This message made Lin Yi's eyes light up. It seemed that risking life and raiding that insane lab was worthwhile. With this system-recognized server, he might really be able to build a laboratory or even a hospital. Such prospects can only be deemed immeasurable for the shelter's future development. Regarding animal reception, the shelter has received the following animals. 2 birds, 1 male, and 1 female. Species, multicolored chicken. Once the animal exhibits its first offspring, the species will be listed in an enhanced form in the store. Your shelter has earned 400 experience points. Reading this message, Lin Yi was a bit puzzled. Why does the shelter receive only 10 points of experience for a person, but 400 points for 2 lousy chickens? But soon, he figured out the reason behind it. Right now, it's the end of the world. In this chaotic world, what is the least valuable? Without a doubt, it's human life. Yet, untainted fauna and flora are exceptionally precious, as they carry life. Even so, Lin Yi couldn't help but mutter, 2 lousy chickens are more valuable than 40 people. Suddenly, he saw an information prompt, detecting mutations in all animals. This mutation is determined as mild, caused by the virus. The virus affects reproductive capabilities, which will decline. The higher the viral concentration in the human body, the lower the pregnancy probability. Based on preliminary calculations, the current average pregnancy probability is 0.001%. All humans will be sterile within 2 months. Are you kidding me? Lin Yi was dumbfounded upon seeing this message. Chapter 87, Bird's Eye 3D Perspective Within 2 months? Sterilization? Lin Yi murmured repeatedly, his face looking very displeased. His brain was working at lightning speed, calculating in his mind, given the current apocalyptic trend. In less than 30 years, humanity is destined to go extinct. If the speed of virus contamination accelerates, perhaps within just 20 years, humans will disappear from this world. Lin Yi felt a headache coming on and quickly sent an email to the shelter system, asking for a solution. Soon, a reply came. Humans can cleanse their bodies of the virus by consuming food and water produced by the shelter. According to preliminary calculations, this will take 20 years, if a person lives inside the shelter. Currently, it will take 10 years. Lin Yi read the shelter's email response, frowning deeply, and asked again, what about medication? There is, then why don't you say so? Lin Yi almost jumped in frustration at the brief response. After a moment, a few words slowly appeared on the screen. Explore on your own. Damn it, I'm on the verge of extinction, and you're messing around with me? Want to die together? Lin Yi was completely enraged. After a long while, the system finally gave another hint. Laboratory, so how do we manufacture it? Lin Yi breathed a little sigh of relief, thanking heavens that there was at least a direction for a solution. But after sending out the email, he waited 10 full minutes without any response, as if it had sunk into the sea. Lin Yi felt somewhat deflated. Laboratory? Where on earth is he supposed to find a Noah's Ark that can enhance fertility and allow humanity to be preserved? Suddenly, he slapped his forehead sharply, finally realizing. Of course, the shelter wouldn't arbitrarily mention hints outside of his understanding. Currently, there's only one item related to medical care in the shelter. The mobile server. It contains a wealth of medical and biological data inside. Thinking of this, Lin Yi felt much more reassured. However, this matter cannot be rushed. He needs to find some experts or upgrade the shelter system. With this in mind, he opened the system store. There is a program in the applications named Personnel Management. Lin Yi had noticed it before, but at that time, the number of people in the shelter was too small, so it was not needed. Now it's different. He immediately spent 3,000 coins to upgrade the Personnel Management program to level 4. Because the shelter hasn't been upgraded yet, many applications are still locked. However, a lit-up program instantly caught Lin Yi's attention. Fishing. This program allows you to fish in the sea of space-time. If you're lucky, you will catch valuable rare items. If unlucky, you find nothing. If extremely unlucky, you may catch terrifying creatures, ranging from being scared to death or losing your life. Please note that the energy consumption of the space-time beacon will significantly increase when this program is running. Building requirement, space-time beacon, price, 2,000 coins. Lin Yi thought for a while but decided not to buy it for the time being. From the description, this thing seems to cause some trouble unless the shelter has its own team of machine gunners and a few tanks. However, this application information looks a bit odd. Lin Yi couldn't help muttering, what kind of bizarre names are these? Might as well just call it space-time fishing, right? As soon as he finished speaking, with a ding sound, a new email popped up in the bottom right corner. All skill content and naming are based on your personality analysis and created. Lin Yi's mouth twitched slightly. So, am I an idiot? The system surprisingly replied directly, yes. His eye twitched crazily. This damned system is getting more intelligent, even learning to mock people. However, he didn't mind this little mockery too much. Then he began setting job titles for personnel management. Field brother, transfer brother, junior admin. After finishing editing, Lin Yi opened the store, intending to purchase some system operation notebooks. But upon seeing the outrageous prices, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Level 1 laptop, priced at 2,200 coins. Level 2. Priced at 2,500 coins. Level 3. Priced at 3,000 coins. Level 4 laptop, priced at 4,000 coins. Lin Yi winced with heartache, gritted his teeth, and reluctantly bought a level 4 laptop. You have purchased the equipment. With the prompt from the shelter, a laptop appeared in front of Lin Yi. The only program on the screen is a card game. According to the instructions, only he, the administrator, has the authority to authorize operation programs onto the new laptop. And it costs money. Equivalent to purchasing the application again. Lin Yi rubbed his chin, suddenly having an idea. What if he had 2 laptops with cameras? Thinking of it made him act, and after purchasing a level 4 camera program, he called Melanie over. A new computer? Melanie, with her Hawkeye skill, spotted the new device on the table from afar, her eyes full of surprise. Boss, do you need my help with anything? Come, see if you can use the camera on this one. I've authorized you. Lin Yi pointed to the chair beside him. Melanie sat down as instructed and tried to operate it. Boss, it works. She exclaimed excitedly. It works for me too, Lin Yi laughed. At this moment, the screens of both the new and old laptops displayed different camera views, each able to look in different directions and independently scan their respective areas. He instructed, go call Chen Yui and Natasha for me. Okay, boss. Melanie ran off. Lin Yi kept working, continuing to purchase and install a shelter architecture planning program onto the new computer. 2 minutes later, Natasha arrived first. Boss. The little girl cheerfully came over. Lin Yi pointed to the new laptop, give it a try. Can't use it. Natasha sat down in front of the table. The mouse seemed particularly large in her tiny hand. She tried to open the camera and planning programs, but the icons didn't respond. Lin Yi waved his hand, and a message appeared in front of the little girl. You've been assigned a new job, camera operator. As a camera operator, you have the right to use the camera application, but you must have the boss's permission. Now the camera works, but... Lin Yi waved his hand again, authorizing Natasha's role as planner. The little girl was instantly thrilled, her face flush with excitement. Wow, boss, look, look. Meanwhile, Melanie returned. Seeing the boss and Natasha with their heads almost touching, she couldn't help but wonder. What are they whispering about? Thinking this, she curiously went over and was soon captivated by the screen. Currently, the entire layout of the shelter appeared on the screen from a 3D bird's eye view. Here, planners could design a whole town, create their buildings, decorate areas, along with more practical features. Additionally, the left sidebar was connected to the store, allowing for a view of all buildings. Most importantly, the system automatically calculated the prices. However, purchases required the boss's approval. The little girl tried the operation. A small fishing pier appeared by the lake on the screen, along with a gravel path leading to it. Lin Yi had the planner continue working. Then, he bought 4 more laptops, all installed with camera programs. Boss, were you looking for me? At this moment, Chen Yui arrived. Chapter 88, Frenzied Opening of Reward Eggs Inside the Shelter. Lin Yi shared his idea with Chen Yui. He planned to form a well-divided team. Some would be responsible for monitoring the cameras, keeping a close eye on the shelter's surroundings. Others would handle important tasks like space-time fishing. If he had a group of fishermen helping him monitor the sea of space-time constantly. He imagined, if there was a group of fishermen who could always watch the dynamics of the sea of space-time. Not only could they detect intruders instantly, but also explore space-time treasures, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Everyone was full of praise for his idea after hearing it. Little Natasha immediately got to work on planning the building with great enthusiasm. In the central area of the shelter, she carefully constructed a management building. Namely the town hall. In addition, She planned the barracks and several other functional buildings, striving to make the layout of the shelter more reasonable and complete. PM Lin Yi finished all his tasks, took a short rest, and returned to the real world. He planned to go to Beauvais town the next day, but before that, he decided to take a ride to the outskirts of Paris. He took out the newly modified Triumph Rocket 3 motorcycle from the shelter. Mounting the bike, he sped silently along the road. Since this area had been cleared by soldiers, there wasn't a single zombie on the road. However, when Lin Yi rode to a high point, the sight before him sent chills down his spine. Looking towards the city, the whole of Paris seemed to be tightly surrounded by an endless circle of zombies. The dense crowd of zombies surged like a tide, with no end in sight from afar. No wonder there are so few zombies in the suburbs. Turns out they've all gathered here. Lin Yi murmured to himself, continuing his ride along the edges of the city of Paris. Everywhere he passed, it was the same terrifying scene, with zombies densely packed around the city, including many mutants. Some large-bodied mutant zombies were easily identifiable, while those with more serious mutations and stronger abilities hid among the regular zombie crowd. They resembled lurking hunters, ready to deliver a deadly strike to anyone approaching. Dusk approached, and darkness was about to fall. Lin Yi found a secluded place and returned to the shelter. Solomon came to report that during this period, there had been several zombie attacks. The quantities each time were not large, never exceeding 3, but worryingly, the frequency of invasions was increasing. Dinner was almost ready. Lin Yi temporarily set aside these worries and sat with everyone to eat. Discussing work at dinner had almost become a routine for this core group. Little Natasha, with sparkling big eyes, said, "Boss, the town is planned out. But we still need to expand the shelter's space." "We'll expand tomorrow," Lin Yi said after chewing and swallowing his food. The residents had worked hard planting all day, and the warriors were either patrolling or killing zombies. If expansion triggered an earthquake before sleep, it could disturb everyone's rest. Suddenly, as if something came to mind, he surveyed the dozen or so people before him. "Who's the luckiest among you?" "Wow." As soon as he said that, the originally quiet atmosphere instantly broke. The women started chattering first, and soon the men joined in. The scene gradually evolved into a noisy debate. Finally, with Lin Yi's intervention, they reached a conclusion. First, all the men immediately claimed they were not lucky at all. Each one declared himself to be the unluckiest person in the world. Lin Yi, helpless, told them to shut up. After some discussion among the girls, they unanimously decided that the luckiest girl was the fiery Annie. It's said her luck on slot machines was super good. If she were in a real casino, she might be banned for hitting jackpots repeatedly. Lin Yi nodded. He always liked Annie's personality, optimistic and straightforward. Whether chatting or working, the two were very in sync. However, although Annie was great at livening up the atmosphere in the shelter, she felt somewhat useless otherwise. But now, she finally had a role to play. At that moment, Annie swallowed her potato pancake and curiously asked, "Boss, why are you asking?" "Here, these are the reward eggs obtained from killing zombies, and they're for you to open," Lin Yi said, waving his hand. 16 white eggs, 3 green eggs, and 1 blue egg appeared on the table instantly. "Wow, haha." Annie's eyes widened in delight. She never thought the boss would assign such an important task to her. Despite being lively, she always envied how her fellow sisters interacted with the boss through their work. She too wanted to do something for the boss rather than just be the shelter's happy mascot. Now, the opportunity finally arrived. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Annie ran quickly to wash her hands. She then adopted a serious expression, preparing to open the blind. No, the reward eggs. With Annie's lucky hands running across them, colorful lights shone dazzlingly on the table. Out of a total of 19 white and green reward eggs, only 1 was empty, while all the others had prizes. In contrast, Lin Yi opened 8, and 4 were empty, showing a stark difference. Lin Yi began to carefully inventory. Second-level items were 2 sets of armor, 3 bows, 1 baseball bat, and 1 one-handed sword. Third-class items were 2 swords and 1 bow. But that wasn't all. She also drew 3 whole skill books. Such special items are the hardest to come by. The sole remaining reward egg was blue, and Annie's hands started sweating with anxiety. She really didn't want to disappoint the boss. If this most important reward egg contained something bad or was even empty, what would she do then? Annie took a deep breath, and slowly opened the egg. Instantly, a dazzling blue light flashed. Wow! Annie couldn't help but jump for joy, her eyes sparkling with pride. Not only had she opened so many good items, but now she even drew the best ranged weapon. Handgun, third-class item, an automatic handgun designed for damage, with decent penetration power and accuracy. A magazine holds 11 bullets, Lin Yi picked up the handgun, and a line of text only he could see appeared before his eyes. Note: decide if you want to turn off the safety, don't tuck it in your waistline, careful you don't shoot yourself below, hee hee. Lin Yi chuckled to himself. But his face burst into a bright smile as he looked at Annie with an expectant gaze. Well done, Annie, from now on, all reward eggs in the shelter will be opened by you. Awesome, awesome. Yay yay yay. Annie leaped up in excitement, and like a fragrant breeze, dashed to Lin Yi and showered him with kisses. The girls laughed at this scene. The scene became lively instantly. 2 minutes later, Lin Yi wiped the drool off his face. Chapter 89, 1,000 zombies attack with a gun in hand, the world is mine. Lin Yi always wanted to get his hands on a system firearm, but had never heard of anyone drawing one. Unexpectedly, Annie, with her exceptional lucky constitution, successfully helped him obtain one. However, it would be perfect if there were more handguns. He envisioned, in case of danger. First, empty the magazine of the first gun, then quickly transfer the gun back to the shelter, and immediately use the second one. Meanwhile, Weaponsmith Seville could reload the first gun in the armory. Cyclically and repeatedly, he would effectively have a handgun with nearly infinite ammunition. Thus, Lin Yi instructed the red-haired beauty, Sylvie, I authorize you to use coins to make bullets for this gun, and also make a few more magazines. Okay, boss. I'm about to reach level 5, and I'll be able to earn skill points after leveling up. Want to go out to grind monsters and level up quickly? No, boss. Sylvie gently tucked the stray hair on her forehead behind her ear. During the past period, she had transformed from a scrawny little frame into a shapely, all-charming beauty. Usually, during the day, she spent most of her time making arrows and maintaining weapons. When her magic power was depleted by a third, she chose to exercise or help in the fields until her magic power returned to its normal level. This was mainly because excessive depletion of magic power would inevitably weaken the body, and the speed of its recovery would decrease. You're hurting little shadow. Zoe suddenly shouted. Lin Yi turned his head toward the sound. He saw Zoe's little pet cat almost suffocated by Annie's overly enthusiastic hug. To say it's a cat is inaccurate, it's Zoe's skill as a professional pet panther. But clearly, something was wrong, the little thing hadn't grown, and now it couldn't even break free from the girl's embrace. The little cat, carefully held back by Zoe, meowed pitifully. Lin Yi's eyelids twitched slightly. Could it protect its owner like this? It's hard-pressed to even defend itself. Is it called Little Shadow? Did you give it growth-inhibiting hormones? Otherwise, why isn't it growing? No, boss. It just won't eat. Eat? Lin Yi was speechless. The system-given skills, whether direct or indirect, are all used to fight zombies. Maybe your little cat doesn't like regular food, perhaps it wants to eat, zombie meat. No. It'll get dirty. Zoe tightly hugged the little cat, her face full of pain and resistance. Lin Yi shrugged. Zoe looked at her little cat, and the cat looked up at her, meowing pitifully, obviously very hungry. With a heavy heart, Zoe eventually steeled herself, wiped away her tears. All right, boss, you're right. Then we'll do a little experiment tomorrow. Lin Yi smiled and then lowered his head to start eating. The group chatted for a bit longer, discussed some construction matters, and then went back to their homes to rest. After all, there were 2 big events the next day. Building a town and selling food. However, just as Lin Yi was sound asleep, an emergency message abruptly woke him from his dreams. Warning, a space-time fragment is heading towards your shelter, collision unavoidable, collision countdown. 30 minutes. Upon reading it, Lin Yi instantly jumped off the bed. There was no time to think, he rushed out of the house, grabbing the loudspeaker. Red alert. Level 1 readiness. Red alert. Level 1 readiness. As the alarm resonated throughout the town, people hurriedly rushed out from their houses, filled with panic and excitement. Solomon, get Sylvie, arm the warriors. We're about to collide with a space-time fragment, only half an hour. Got it, boss. Solomon swiftly took the command. Everyone else, place all lighting equipment, anything that can shine, around the town perimeter. The floodlights on the watchtower alone are not enough, and also. Following Lin Yi's rapid-fire instructions, everyone immediately got busy. The entire shelter went into combat readiness. The next 30 minutes flew by. Until a slight tremor occurred. The western fog wall began to dissipate, and then zombies appeared. So many zombies. Hundreds, even thousands of zombies, all crazily crashing into the barrier wall. Fortunately, the shelter's defenses had been upgraded the day before, and the sturdy fence temporarily held back this raging tide of zombies. Notice, during the collision, the shop cannot be used. Lin Yi glanced at the prompt, his gaze instantly becoming sharp as an eagle's. He raised his sword high above and shouted loudly, Archers assist with long-range shooting. Warriors stab through the wire fence gaps. Guards disperse to the periphery, cover the soldiers. Saying this, he dived into battle like a leopard. The black one-handed sword, razor sharp, swept with powerful grace in Lin Yi's hand. He sliced along the wire fence gaps, instantly decapitating several zombies, blood splattering everywhere, creating a shocking scene. The reason he replaced the wooden poles of the first fence with earth pillars and retained the wire mesh, instead of making it an earth wall, was to make it easier to kill zombies. Although this carried some risk, as the saying goes, the best defense is a good offense. And indeed it was. The zombie tide kept surging in, only to collapse continuously. The dead zombie bodies were swiftly absorbed by the shelter like water, converted into biological matter. The resilient fence held on steadfastly, with the defense going smoothly for the time being. At this moment, a dozen massive zombies appeared. These mutant zombies were smarter than their kind. They had been waiting for several waves of minions to try first, finding the pressure points of the fence before launching an attack. 3 batches of big zombies, like icebreakers, carved 3 channels through the tide. Then, they started to batter the fence with all their might. Each collision made the fence shake violently, as if on the verge of collapsing at any moment. Seeing this, Lin Yi quickly dispatched reinforcements to these vulnerable spots. Without intercoms, commanding the team was a bit troublesome, but fortunately, he had previously arranged for Solomon to organize the warriors into teams. 5-man teams, each with a leader and numbers, made the command slightly smoother. When Lin Yi arrived at one of the danger zones, the scene made his heart tighten. 4 massive zombies were crazily attacking, almost breaking through the fence. "You guys deal with the minions, I'll handle these 4 big guys." Lin Yi shouted loudly, forcing a large zombie with a flame device back with one sword, his voice like a booming bell. The warriors, seeing this, felt relieved one by one. They had just become warriors not long ago and couldn't become battle-hardened soldiers in a short period. But facing such enormous dangers without retreating, Lin Yi acknowledged their willpower. He held a sword in his right hand, a gun in his left. Only third-class weapons could effectively deal with mutant zombies. Second level could only scratch their hide, let alone kill them. Roar! Ah! The massive zombies roared upon seeing Lin Yi, crashing with even more force against the fence. Lin Yi awaited the right moment. When the big brute charged crazily again, he thrust his sword, a deft wrist twist, move smooth as flowing water, completed in one breath. The robust mutant zombie's body went limp instantly, collapsing heavily on the fence. Witnessing this scene, the warriors were first surprised, then amazed. The boss. So strong? Good. In an instant, the warriors were all filled with high morale, bravely killing enemies. And the few big zombies, seeing their comrades solved so quickly, panicked instantly. They recoiled a bit, trying to hide behind the minions. Chapter 90, Learning from Chen Yuyu to wake up within a shelter. Lin Yi saw the hulking zombie show fear and without hesitation raised his handgun. Bam! A loud bang, like thunder, exploded on the battlefield, making ears throb in pain. The hulking zombie let out a harrowing scream, its head exploding like a watermelon hit by a heavy hammer, brain matter and blood splattering everywhere, an extremely gruesome sight. Is this what they call decent penetration power? Lin Yi was secretly amazed, recalling the description of the handgun in the system. Decent penetration power. If this was only considered decent, then what must high penetration power be like? No time to think about it, he quickly put all distractions aside and raised his gun once more to shoot. Bang bang, 2 more gunshots, and 2 more hulking zombies fell with a crash, raising a cloud of dust. At this moment, the battle became increasingly fierce, and the situation grew more and more tense. Lin Yi quickly rushed to the next danger zone. He saw 2 soldiers with lightning skills working together in a fierce battle with a hulking zombie. They coordinated seamlessly, one distracting the zombie, while the other released lightning at the right moment, successfully taking down the ferocious zombie. Just then, several hulking zombies surrounded the 2, ready to kill. The 2 mages looked resolute, their eyes filled with despair. Bang bang. Suddenly, 2 thunderous blasts. The heads of several hulking zombies exploded around the 2 like blooming bloody fireworks. Boss? Boss. The 2 mages, full of admiration and surprise. Lin Yi nodded to them, well done. Then he turned into a black lightning, rushing quickly to the last danger zone. However, before he could reach it, he heard a loud crash. The fence, under unbearable strain, finally collapsed. Upon seeing this, the warriors picked up their swords and axes, and charged into close combat with the zombies without hesitation. Lin Yi quickly joined the battlefield. The sword in his hand was like a harvester, countless zombies falling as he spun like a top in a killing spree. This thrilling battle continued all night, with severed limbs littering the ground. The battlefield was filled with smoke, with the sounds of shouts and screams interweaving, making one's heart tremble. When the first ray of sunlight shone down, at 5 o'clock in the morning, all the zombies were finally eliminated. Unfortunately, there were some casualties. Some soldiers and guards died, and more than a dozen warriors suffered severe fractures, but their lives were saved. Relying on the miraculous healing power of the magical lake water, they could recover completely in about half a month. You have successfully repelled the invasion. The shop has now reopened. The shelter cannot be expanded until you occupy or abandon the time-space fragment. Your rewards have been collected and transferred to the warehouse. You have obtained 3,123 coins and 48 reward eggs. 3,047 zombie corpses have been transferred to the bottomless pit, totaling 30,470 units of biological material. Seeing the message from the shelter, Lin Yi was so exhausted that his legs almost gave out, nearly collapsing to the ground. But abandoning the time-space fragment is obviously not an option. He assigned 10 people to patrol the surrounding areas, while the others were given time to rest. However, the shelter's first skirmish was so brutal that most people were still shaken and unable to sleep peacefully. But clearly, this didn't include Lin Yi. As soon as he returned to his room, his head hit the pillow and he fell into a deep sleep. It was 11 o'clock when someone came in. "Boss? Boss?" Annie stomped anxiously by the bed, unable to wake Lin Yi. She could only look to the red-haired beauty for help. "Sylvie, help me, I can't wake him." "That's your job, I'm not getting involved." Sylvie, looking pale and weak, leaned against a chair, having expended too much magic power in last night's battle, barely having the energy to speak. Currently, Chen Yuiu and Solomon were busy managing the shelter's affairs and couldn't spare the time. Lin Yi was supposed to be woken at 10, but Annie's efforts were in vain. She anxiously paced the room, finally resorting to shaking her boss vigorously. "Boss, something's wrong." "Sylvie, drink your hidden ice-cold beer." "Boss, the potato field has been gnawed by rats, get up." Seeing Lin Yi still not waking, Sylvie suddenly blushed and tugged Annie aside. She whispered in her ear, "You could try Chen Yui's method." "What?" Annie's eyes widened. Sylvie pointed, with a mischievous smile, to a noticeable area on Lin Yi's pants. "I think the boss is already used to waking up that way, I bet he won't get up without it." Annie noticed Sylvie's teasing look, her face turning as red as a ripe tomato. She hesitated for a long time before murmuring softly, then, "You go out first." "Ha ha ha." Sylvie first laughed loudly, then shouted at Lin Yi in Annie's shock. "Boss, someone has their eyes on your butt." "Damn it, ho." Lin Yi sprang up as if on a spring, jumping 3 feet high, his eyes wide open. Sweeping around, he only saw 2 mischievous girls. But when he saw the clock, he froze. "Didn't I tell you to wake me at 10? Annie didn't complete the task." Sylvie chuckled with glee. Annie said nothing, just blushed. After a few yawns, Lin Yi crawled out of the makeshift tent. Like the warriors, he had slept in his clothes, so he was still filthy, covered in zombie blood and dust. At this time, Solomon approached. Lin Yi stretched his sore body and asked, "What's the situation? Any more attacks?" "No attacks, everything is normal. Most people are in the fields harvesting crops." "And the experience points?" "There were many ordinary zombies last night, and we gained a lot. The system accounted for every kill, even if someone didn't use the system weapon." Lin Yi raised an eyebrow, not expecting the system to be so accommodating. Solomon continued to report, "The average level of the warriors is now level 3, and I am at level 5. Great, let the warriors rest a bit more, and in 2 hours, we'll conduct a counter-invasion." "Understood, boss." After inspecting the defenses and personnel, Lin Yi went to the dining table, where everyone was waiting to eat with him. The group began eating, and halfway through the meal, the usually silent Katsuya suddenly looked at Lin Yi. She softly asked, "Can we build a small stage by the lake?" She was the gentlest girl in the shelter, with naturally milky white hair, pale, delicate skin, and an innocent face. This exotic beauty was affectionately called Snow White by everyone. Lin Yi smiled and said, "You want to perform? You remember?" Katsuya was extremely excited. She didn't expect the boss to remember she was a singer. "Yes, of course." Lin Yi remained calm, as if it were the most natural thing. He turned to look at the little girl Natasha. "Can you modify the map?" Yes." The little girl, her mouth full of food, nodded her head energetically. After lunch, Lin Yi prepared to take people into the world of space-time fragments to have a good look. Chapter 91, Entering the Space-Time Fragment Inside the Shelter. Lin Yi had a few matters to address. Solomon, assign people to increase lighting along the border and add another layer of barbed wire fence. He didn't want to return from the world of space-time fragments only to find his home gone. Once arrangements were made, he waved his hand, and 48 reward eggs appeared on the table instantly. Annie raised her hand excitedly. "That's my task." Lin Yi felt helpless and nodded. After that, he focused on deciding which tools to use for the counterattack in the world of space-time fragments. Since he had no idea what awaited them on the other side. Ultimately, Lin Yi decided to purchase a heavy-duty double door made of reinforced concrete and metal. This door connected the two worlds and was sturdy enough to briefly withstand a tank's impact. This item wasn't cheap in the shop. It cost him a whopping 5,000 coins. Afterward, he drove out the repaired military jeep, the heavy machine gun on the roof glinting in the sunlight. 5 people were involved in this raid, all elite members of the shelter, Lin Yi himself, Solomon, and the Dhuan and Xiaoxuan brothers. In last night's defense battle, the Dhuan and Xiaoxuan brothers performed excellently, with one at level 5 and the other at level 4. The task of operating the heavy machine gun fell unsurprisingly on Solomon's shoulders. Because he was the only one in the shelter familiar with the weapon's use. The huge door slowly rose, and the military jeep drove into a passageway, with another door at the end. Once that door opened, they would be heading into another dangerous world. The world of space-time fragments was in autumn. The entrance to the fragment was a small forest. It took only a minute with the jeep to pass through this small forest and then enter a small village. This village consisted of cylindrical 3-story apartment buildings and a few shops, arranged in a peculiar layout. The village was located in a corner of the fragment, shrouded by heavy fog to the north and west. Some buildings even extended into the fog, like pieces of a disassembled puzzle. The raiding team led by Lin Yi was only seeing one piece of it. He focused intently. There were only 6 apartment buildings, in ruins, with most windows still stained with dried blood. Among the 5 team members, some understood Chinese, some English, some French, but none recognized the symbols and writing on the buildings. Logically, the sea of space-time should be filled with fragments of other destroyed worlds. Since Earth remained intact, it was reasonable to speculate that this was perhaps a world beyond Earth. "Maybe we should have brought the professor," Lin Yi said in a low voice, snapping a few photos with his phone. At this moment, Xiaoxuan pointed to an apartment building. "Boss, look, something's moving in that building." "Great, I'll take someone to the roof." "Xiaoxuan, cover us with your bow and arrows." "Yes, boss. I can enchant the arrows now, leave it to me," Xiaoxuan replied. He was swift, quickly jumping onto the roof of the military jeep, kneeling on one knee, and drawing his bow fully. His gaze like a hawk, firmly locked on the surroundings. Lin Yi, meanwhile, headed toward the apartment building with the bearman. "Dhuan, you're immune to the virus, so you can be my human shield." "But, boss." Hearing this, the kid's face turned pale, naturally full of apprehension. The two reached the nearest southern entrance and saw the apartment building's metal door completely destroyed, the dents looking as if hammered heavily. Lin Yi had Dhuan transform into the bearman, tossed him a headlamp, and himself wielded a one-handed sword and a pistol, vigilant. In this unknown space-time fragment, Melanie couldn't monitor the surroundings via the shelter's cameras. No one knew what dangers awaited, so they had to be extremely cautious. "All right, let's go," Lin Yi commanded, and the two stepped into the apartment building. On the first floor, there were 2 apartments, one on each side, with metal doors smashed open. They cautiously entered to check but found nothing. The second floor was the same. 2 rooms, and again, nothing. Just as Dhuan was about to head up further, Lin Yi suddenly stopped him and turned back. "Let's head back, searching each floor like this seems a bit dumb." Dhuan obeyed, following him out of the apartment building. Solomon saw this and shouted from afar, "What's up, boss? It's too much trouble to search the building, I thought of an easier way." "Everyone, get on the roof." Once everyone was on the vehicle, Lin Yi opened the car window and took out a megaphone from the back seat. He turned the volume to the maximum. Hey! Hey! Anyone alive? Or are there zombies inside? Come out and enjoy the nice warm sun with us." "Boss, what are you doing?" At this point, everyone was confused and a bit anxious. In contrast, Lin Yi remained calm. He knew that fighting zombies inside buildings was very dangerous. It was quite possible to be surrounded unnoticed or outnumbered and then get overrun. But if they lured them outside, it became more like target practice, easier and safer. "Look, here they come." 9 zombies leapt out from the apartment building Lin Yi had just exited. Seeing this, Solomon, being the warrior commander, immediately understood the boss's intention, feeling a bit more impressed. These 9 zombies weren't mutants, but still looked somewhat different from ordinary zombies. They were dressed in coveralls but made from denim blue fabric, appearing quite odd. Lin Yi casually strutted toward the new friends. Meanwhile, Xiaoxuan shot arrow after arrow, hitting his mark every time, taking out 3 zombies directly. The bearman Dhuan, or should it now be human bear? He charged out, I'll take the one on the right. I'll handle the ones on the left. Solomon also activated his skills, his skin hardening like rock. Looking awe-inspiring, like a stone statue. The zombies, drawn by the sound, shuffled slowly toward them. Seeing humans, they roared hungrily and picked up the pace. As usual, Lin Yi stood in front of the team, transporting large miscellaneous items from the shelter's warehouse and placing them as barricades. The battle quickly became effortless. Chuan used his bear claws to crush a zombie's head, the sheer force astonishing. Solomon, with his hammer-like fists, shattered a zombie's skull. Lin Yi easily slashed zombies climbing on the barricade, his movements smooth and continuous. The scene was violently gory, brains splattering everywhere, yet looked pretty cool. Right then, Ziaxuan shouted from the jeep top, "Boss, more zombies are coming." Lin Yi, hearing this, quickly surveyed the surroundings. Chapter 92, Bombing Paris? World of Space-Time Fragments. Lin Yi's gaze was as sharp as a blade, swiftly surveying the surroundings. He saw a horde of zombies swarm out of the other 5 apartment buildings like a tide. Roughly estimated, there were about 60 zombies. To be more exact, only a few dozen zombies were still barely able to walk, dragging their twisted bodies. And there were dozens of zombies that broke their limbs jumping out of windows, left convulsing painfully on the ground. The scene was unbearable to watch. Meanwhile, some wandering zombies emerged from the forest, crazily rushing towards the source of the sound. Lin Yi's voice was loud and commanding, "Machine gunners, Solomon, take your positions." "Right away, boss." Quickly disabling skill mode, his formerly rock-hard body instantly regained softness. With agility, he leapt into the jeep, firmly handling the heavy machine gun, started aiming bursts at the rushing targets. Zombies from all sides fell under the heavy machine gun fire like leaves in a storm, limbs flying, chest cavities exploding. The powerful firepower of the heavy machine gun could sweep down several zombies at a time, their brains splattered like minced meat, the bloody scene sickening. To save as many bullets as possible, Solomon's targets were often zombie groups of more than a dozen. Those few gathered together rushing forward, were handled by the close-quarters combat personnel. Ziaxuan was not idle either, tirelessly shooting arrow after arrow from the rooftop. His speed and accuracy were stellar, each zombie had its skull pierced by an arrow before even reaching close. Within moments, zombies fell one by one. "Ziaxuan, you rascal, stop shooting whoosh 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 all the time. You're taking all the experience points. Leave some for your big brothers. And Chuan, stop being such a coward. You've become immune, chop off their necks. Or turn into a bear and smash them into mince." Lin Yi, while keeping an eye out for potential danger, loudly commanded the battle. The warriors, under his direction, made remarkable progress. Even the outstanding Solomon was not spared. Inside the space-time fragment, the battle ended quickly. The zombie horde dropped 2 reward eggs and each dropped a coin. But the primary value of the space-time fragment was not these zombies. It was the resources, technology, and talents within this world. However, the team decided to pause the search. Because Lin Yi was pressed for time, he had to complete an important trade in Beauvais town. "What are you all doing here?" After passing through the gate, Lin Yi saw dozens of people, including Chen Yuiu and the girls. "Boss, we're very worried." Chen Yuiu was restless with anxiety, her eyes full of concern. What if last night's attack was just the beginning? What if the boss didn't come back? Or if he came back, but brought a horde of zombies trailing behind? All kinds of terrifying scenarios kept popping up in her mind, so she came to the door to wait for news. Seeing this, the girls decided to keep her company. But actually, amid the worry, they were also looking for an excuse to slack off, as everyone else was busy harvesting the crops. "Alright. There's a small village over there." Lin Yi briefly explained the situation inside the space-time fragment to everyone. Then, he turned to look at the 3 he had just reprimanded. "Solomon, rest for half an hour, then take these 2 fools, and call on the assault riflemen, bowmen, and all beastmen reinforcements. Continue clearing the village. If mutants appear, use heavy weapons to deal with them." "Understood, boss." Solomon nodded solemnly. Lin Yi then turned to Chen Yuiu. "If I remember correctly, there should be about 500 rabbits. Have they all grown up by now?" "Yes, boss. And we have over 1,000 rabbit babies." Lin Yi pondered for a moment before speaking gravely. "Have the butchers start preparing rabbit meat and rabbit hides. Currently we only slaughter 20% of adult rabbits daily." "About 100? We won't sell this meat for now. Let's have our people eat their fill first, then trade it outward." "Yay!" In an instant, everyone present jumped up excitedly, faces beaming with joy. Chen Yui flashed a brilliant smile, filled with gratitude and admiration for Lin Yi. Though the boss sometimes acted like a tyrant, he was actually a compassionate leader. Everyone who knew him, despite his odd personality, sincerely respected him. The person feeling the most complex emotions was Annie. She cried, tears and drool flowing together, "No. Can we not kill those fluffy little rabbits?" But most of the meat lovers ignored her. Everyone wanted to eat meat. After arranging everything in the shelter, Lin Yi returned to the real world. The landing spot was in a small shop. "Looks like there are more zombies," he murmured while gazing out the shop window at the endless zombie swarm encircling the capital of France. The dense sea of zombies resembled a black ocean, chilling to behold. After roaming the suburb for a while, Lin Yi prepared to head to Beauvais town. If he succeeded in this raid, he would earn a substantial number of coins, aiding rapid shelter construction. Speeding all the way, he raced towards Beauvais town. Along the way, there were several checkpoints. He passed each without inspection, courteously allowed through by the soldiers, clearly instructed of his arrival beforehand. This continued until he was nearly to the destination where he was asked to stop. A stern military officer, holding a walkie-talkie, briefly exchanged words with someone on the other end. Upon receiving a reply, he politely invited Lin Yi, "Please come with me, the commander wants me to bring you to him." "All right." Lin Yi responded calmly, returning the motorcycle to the warehouse under the amazed gaze of the officer. Then, he followed the officer to the other side of the checkpoint where there was an armored personnel carrier specially prepared to receive him. Upon entering the vehicle, Lin Yi observed the scenes through the window. The streets were bustling with people, rushing about, some transporting goods, others conveying messages. Everywhere there were hordes of soldiers and military vehicles, the engine roars intermingling. The personnel carrier sped along, eventually arriving at the command headquarters. The atmosphere here was even busier, with tension permeating the air. It seemed to herald a major operation. Once the vehicle stopped, Lin Yi was ushered into a conference room. An officer swiftly prepared a cup of coffee for him, respectfully saying, "Please wait, the commander is in a meeting." Lin Yi nodded slightly and walked to the window. The day was overcast and grim, but people on the streets seemed especially driven, as if poised for a great victory. Suddenly, Melanie's voice came through his communication device into Lin Yi's ear. "Boss, they're discussing plans to attack Paris in the conference room. 5 days later, at 9 a.m., they're going to bombard Paris and then break the blockade." Chapter 93, Energy Corps Beauvais Town, Military Command Headquarters. Lin Yi was taken aback by Melanie's report. He recalled the tanks parked by the roadside the last time he left Beauvais Town, which left a deep impression on him. He didn't expect that so soon. They were planning a large-scale attack on Paris. Bombard Paris? This was undoubtedly an extremely bold decision. But with the current military strength of Beauvais Town, can they really do it? Lin Yi was full of doubts. Just then, the door of the conference room was abruptly opened, and a dozen officers and a few civilians streamed out from the commander's office. All their eyes uniformly turned towards Lin Yi, who was standing by the window. Some looked at him with friendliness and goodwill, while others with suspicion and vigilance. Soon, a soldier strode over to Lin Yi, who remained calm and composed. With a respectful tone, he said, "The commander invites you to the office for some coffee." Lin Yi nodded and walked steadily into the office. He saw that the red-wined Commander Raphael was sitting on a chair, looking utterly exhausted. His hair appeared slightly disheveled, and there was some dust on his uniform. Clearly, he had been busy handling various affairs in the last couple of days and hardly had a decent rest. "You look incredibly busy," Lin Yi said with a faint smile as he slowly leaned back into the soft sofa. The red-wined commander replied helplessly, "It's been a long time since I've handled so much in such a short period." "You're preparing to attack Paris?" "Yes." "How did you figure it out?" The red-wined commander had a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Though it wasn't a secret, this guy had just arrived recently, so how did he know? The atmosphere in the town is completely different, and military vehicles have suddenly appeared everywhere. Those didn't just appear out of nowhere. The red-wined commander had a proud smile on his face as he began to explain. It turned out that 2 days ago, after a hard-fought battle, they successfully reclaimed a military base from the zombies. The base was fully equipped, enough to arm thousands of soldiers. These advanced weapons and equipment greatly enhanced their strength. Moreover, in a bunker underneath the base, a significant number of soldiers and base personnel had survived, and their joining had injected new vitality into the camp. One could say, with the solid foundation of food provided by Lin Yi, it was sufficient to support a large number of soldiers. On top of these excellent equipment, their camp had become very strong. No wonder they had such strong confidence to prepare for the attack on Paris. Lin Yi squinted his eyes slightly, lost in thought. It's true that Beauvais town's strength had significantly grown, yet why would they discuss such an important matter with an outsider like himself? Were they out of coin and wanted to barter? If so, did that mean he could trade for a batch of guns and ammunition from them? This would be crucial for the shelter that had just gone through a major battle. Thinking of this, Lin Yi's lips slightly curved upwards, teasing the red wine commander. I see, so you're showing off your strength in front of me? Haha, to be honest, we really don't have enough coin to buy the food we need, so we're thinking of trading guns and ammunition for some supplies with you. The red wine commander finished speaking, his eyes closely watching Lin Yi's expression, dreading that he might reject the proposal. After all, the other party not only had various unique abilities but also a powerful organization behind him, and his attitude played a decisive role in the deal. Lin Yi frowned slightly and asked, that guy, Gus or something, did he agree to this deal? Gustav? He's already agreed and even drafted a list of things we can offer you. As the red wine commander spoke, he pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Lin Yi. It detailed the types and quantities of equipment, weapons, and ammunition. Lin Yi took the list, looked carefully, and found that most were light weapons like pistols. He knew that pistols were not very effective against zombies, especially in large-scale battles. Do you have any shotguns? Shotguns can fire shells containing multiple bullets, releasing 9 pellets at once in a conical spread, causing widespread damage. The only downside is the need for close-range attacks, which requires the user's courage and skill. Yes, there's quite a few. The red wine commander clapped his hands excitedly, then quickly smiled awkwardly. Most of his soldiers were afraid to approach zombie hordes, and those who were brave enough were all equipped with system weapons, so they didn't need shotguns. Lin Yi flipped through the list again and found the prices outrageously high, almost comparable to the Louvre. He thought of Gustav's sour face and immediately understood that the other party agreed probably to fleece him. 40 pounds of food for one shotgun, I can't afford such a price. I can only give you 30 pounds at most. All right. After thinking for a moment, the red wine commander finally nodded in agreement. Lin Yi then began writing the purchase list: 6 Sauer MPX submachine guns, an excellent weapon for special forces in close-quarters combat, with outstanding armor-piercing capability. Remington 870 shotguns, a control weapon in close-range encounters, with extremely powerful lethality. Additionally, there were 30,000 rounds of 9mm bullets, 10,000 rounds of ammunition for Remington shotguns, and various related small items. After calculating all the items, the red wine commander complained slightly, it's a total of 50,000 coins. Are you sure you don't want to buy a bit more? If these toys were better, I would buy more. By the way, how much food do you want this time? Twice as much as last time. Boss, Chen Yuiu says it will take us an hour to prepare all the potatoes and vegetables. Melanie, being very astute, had already inquired about the food preparation progress with Chen Yuiu before the negotiation began. Lin Yi smiled and looked at the red wine commander. Deal, but before that, I'd like to enjoy a lunch, and then I'll go check out the guns. Lunch is in half an hour. How about I take you to an interesting place for a stroll first, what do you think? The red wine commander enthusiastically suggested, seemingly having some agenda in mind. Lin Yi laughed and nodded. 5 minutes later, the commander personally drove a jeep, taking Lin Yi slowly into the city. Along the way, the busy figures of soldiers could be seen everywhere, evidently gearing up for the impending battle. The jeep paused briefly at a soldier-guarded checkpoint before smoothly passing through. They arrived at the destination, an abandoned farm. As they approached the farm, Lin Yi wrinkled his brow. The air was thick with a strong scent of blood, prompting him to survey the surrounding buildings. The red wine commander, smiling, explained to Lin Yi. This used to be a small meat processing plant. When the apocalypse struck, none of the cattle escaped the zombies and were eaten clean. Now, this building still processes meat, except the subject is no longer cattle. But some interesting things. Chapter 94, Paris must be destroyed. Beauvais town, abandoned farm. The red wine commander finished explaining, a sly smile appearing on his face, and then led Lin Yi inside the building. Lin Yi's curiosity was also aroused. When they stopped, the scene before them left Lin Yi utterly shocked. Is that a wild boar? Lin Yi could hardly believe his eyes. Before them hung a wild boar whose body type was even larger than a bull, suspended high by 2 sturdy hooks. 2 people stood nearby, skillfully wielding sharp blades to gut the wild boar. One of them struggled to extract the massive internal organs of the boar, quickly dragging them to a table on the side. The first time I saw it, my jaw almost dropped in shock. This boar's skin is incredibly tough, light weapons are completely ineffective against it. The commander grinned, walking up to the pig's carcass. This guy weighs about 1.5 tons. Experts speculate that this is the result of animals accelerating their evolution to adapt to this post-apocalyptic world. That theory sounds quite reasonable. Lin Yi nodded, involuntarily recalling the rat he saw in the sewer that was the size of a cat. However, this little thing completely overturns that theory. The Red Wine Commander said, taking a grape-sized green orb from his pocket and handing it to Lin Yi. Lin Yi took it and examined it carefully. Energy core, a consumable containing energy, can be used as an energy source, or consumed to restore magic power, IP. Core grows within second level or higher mutated bodies, an idea vaguely formed in Lin Yi's mind. He returned the orb to the commander. Interesting, have you found this thing inside zombies before? Not yet. Are you planning to eat this thing? Lin Yi pointed to the pig's carcass, slightly puzzled. We conducted some tests. This meat is edible and nutritious. We found some volunteers to try it, and none experienced any adverse effects. The Red Wine Commander finished speaking, his face now replaced with seriousness. Experts analyze that this mutation phenomenon might be affecting all creatures on Earth. Even insects are no exception? Lin Yi raised an eyebrow. Very likely. Looks like it's time to install mosquito nets on the windows, and they better be made of iron. I bet those mutated bugs won't be faced by ordinary fly swatters. Haha, talking with you is truly enjoyable. The Red Wine Commander laughed heartily. The two chatted casually for a while longer, then returned together to the headquarters. By then, a sumptuous feast was already prepared. Much like last time, lunch was quite lavish. With plenty of meat, along with soup, salad, and some fruit. Lin Yi did not hold back and indulged in the food, wolfing it down. After lunch, Lin Yi and the Red Wine Commander arrived at a large area surrounded by fences. I'm really sorry, but due to limited warehouse space at the moment, we don't have extra room to store all your purchased guns, so they're all placed here. The Red Wine Commander pointed to a pile of crates inside the fence. Lin Yi nodded, stepped forward, and quickly checked the weapons in the crates. He skillfully picked up a gun, pulled the bolt, examined the internal structure, and checked the condition and loading of the ammunition. After a round of inspection, he found these weapons, in terms of appearance and performance, to be quite satisfactory, and he couldn't help but feel pleased. Then, he walked to the center of the clearing. Due to the current insufficient power of the shelter's transport, it was impossible to transport all goods at once. Thus, after a little thought, Lin Yi methodically divided the transport into 4 sessions. With the flickering of strange lights, 60 tons of potatoes and 20 tons of vegetables, including cabbage, carrots, onions, etc., were transported one by one to the clearing. Although the Red Wine Commander had witnessed Lin Yi's magical transportability more than once, he was still deeply amazed each time. He shook his head with a smile and handed Lin Yi a bag. Lin Yi took the bag, glanced inside, and it was filled with survivor coins in denominations of 1,000. He didn't bother counting and trusted the Red Wine Commander enough to directly teleport both the coins and guns to the shelter's warehouse. Having done all this, he turned to the Red Wine Commander. I guess you won't have enough coins to buy more food again in the short term, right? That's true. But I think within a week, I'll find other ways to trade food with you. Deal, I'll be back in a week. The two exchanged smiles and shook hands. However, just as they were about to turn back, an officer came running toward them in a panic. Commander. There's urgent news. Zombies are pouring into the city. The Red Wine Commander's face darkened, shouting sternly, What zombies? Which city exactly? Speak clearly. I'm sorry, Commander. It's the hordes of zombies surrounding Paris, they are all moving towards the city simultaneously. The officer replied, gasping for breath. This is our chance. The Red Wine Commander's eyes lit up instantly, as if seeing the dawn of victory. In his view, if the zombies scattered, the army could more easily break through their defenses and then reach the destination successfully. What's going on? Lin Yi asked. All the zombies besieging Paris are starting to move deeper into the city. We need to mobilize troops immediately, and if you're willing, we can escort you into the city. The Red Wine Commander said while looking at Lin Yi, his eyes carrying a hint of expectation. Lin Yi thought for a while, weighing the pros and cons, but he had a vague bad feeling about the whole thing. Eventually, he firmly shook his head and declined. No, thank you. I think it's safer for me to act alone. I understand, good luck to you. The Red Wine Commander nodded slightly, a hint of regret in his eyes. Lin Yi sincerely said, You too, Commander Raphael. After shaking hands again, they bid each other farewell. Lin Yi left Beauvais town, mounted his motorcycle, started the engine, and sped toward Paris. Along the way, the wind roared past his ears, and the scenery on either side swiftly retreated. Melanie couldn't help but ask, Boss, why did you refuse? Wouldn't traveling with the army be safer for you? It's hard to say. Lin Yi shook his head, a hint of worry in his eyes. He felt that everyone seemed to have underestimated the madness of the city of Paris. He couldn't help but recall the scenes from the laboratory. The highly human-like chimpanzee, especially those mutated zombies with tentacles growing inside them. The terror they brought still lingered vividly in his mind. Just then, a prompt sounded. New mission: all residents of Paris are going to perish soon. Are you willing to save some who are useful to the shelter's development? You only have 1 week. Starting from now, if by the time the deadline expires, you have at least 1,000 people in your shelter who have signed contract agreements with you, you will receive a reward. Reward: new items in the store, along with additional rewards based on mission completion. Lin Yi, upon hearing the prompt, tensed up in his heart. Chapter 95, Red Zombie on the Road to Paris. Lin Yi was riding a motorcycle, like an arrow leaving the bowstring, speeding toward the city. He was contemplating the tasks and rewards of the shelter. Damn. I just wanted to sell some potatoes, make some money, and build my shelter. How did I get involved in all this trouble? Currently, the shelter already has over 600 people. Adding over 300 more doesn't seem to be too much of an issue in terms of space and resource reserves. As for the candidates, they must be considered carefully. The general of the commercial building, Hubert. The leader of the Sacred Heart Cathedral, Emmanuel. And the commander of Beauvais town, Raphael. But these people are all extraordinarily capable. Convincing them to join the shelter is by no means an easy task. At this moment, the road ahead has been cleared. As the soldiers said, the surroundings were eerily silent, not even a single staggering zombie in sight. Along the way, he saw a lot of soldiers on guard. A rough count showed at least 4 observation posts, closely monitoring the movements in Paris. Melanie, we're heading to the cathedral. Okay, boss. Melanie's voice came through the headset. She had a city map in hand, capable of precisely planning the best route from point A to point B. Initially, the journey was eerily calm. But soon, small groups of scattered zombies began to appear. They wandered aimlessly on the street, like lost souls separated from their main group. The number of these zombies was large, ranging from dozens to hundreds, densely blocking the streets. Lin Yi observed for a while and realized he couldn't easily bypass them. Melanie, have Solomon and his men prepare for battle. Boss, he's still clearing the space-time fragments. Lin Yi smacked his forehead, annoyed at himself for forgetting about the space-time fragments. Then I'll take a detour. He turned his bike around and headed down another street. Luckily, there were relatively fewer zombies on this street. Relying on his riding and combat skills, Lin Yi fought his way through, creating a bloody path. There's a group of zombies at the corner, boss. Melanie's voice came through again. Why is there always trouble at every corner? How many? Lin Yi stopped the motorcycle, cautiously surveying the surroundings. Strangely, he didn't see a single zombie. The eerie silence filled him with a sense of impending doom. Melanie. Thousands. Boss, run. Before Melanie's words were finished, a series of roars like those from medical lab primates came drifting down the street. Lin Yi focused and saw a black chimpanzee zombie appear by the window of a nearby apartment building. Soon after, another emerged. One of them shrieked, its cry sharp and piercing, and then the other followed suit. The piercing cries echoed down the street. Triggered a chain reaction. Within seconds, hundreds of black chimpanzee zombies were all screaming, creating a scene like a roar from hell. Lin Yi didn't have time to think, he floored the accelerator, the motorcycle shot forward like an arrow. Just as he left, stones and shards of glass rained down. What are these monkeys doing here? How could there be so many? In the lab, there seemed to be only a few dozen. Wind whipped past Lin Yi's ears as he sped along, pondering in his mind. At that moment, Melanie's startled voice came intermittently through the headset. Boss, but they have a nest there. I saw many young creatures inside, along with countless zombie corpses. They've been eating those corpses. Ugh. The scene Melanie witnessed made her nauseous and vomit uncontrollably in the shelter. Lin Yi revved the accelerator, wanting to escape this group of black chimpanzee zombies. Don't look, tell me which way to go. Go straight, then take the first left. Melanie quickly regained her composure. She began checking the map, directing the boss. Lin Yi floored the accelerator. The motorcycle zigzagged through the streets, continually evading the black chimpanzee zombies that leapt from building tops to chase them. This chase lasted for half an hour before it finally ended. Watching the black chimpanzee zombies on the buildings, pounding their chests in frustration and roaring, Lin Yi finally breathed a sigh of relief. This city is just. But before he could finish speaking, a trash can suddenly came hurtling towards him. With great impact, it flung him off the motorcycle, he landed heavily on the road, and then rolled several meters across the ground. Every part of his body that could get hurt was harmed. The motorcycle crashed headlong into a parked car at full speed, becoming unrecognizable. Damn it, it really hurts. What the hell was that? Melanie. Lin Yi gritted his teeth, struggling to get up amidst the intense pain. Anyone else would have been down and out from such a severe accident. But with his strong constitution and third-class system armor, he only suffered abrasions and bruises. At least for now, he was able to stand and move. Lin Yi dusted himself off, grabbed his favorite level 3 pistol, and cautiously surveyed the surroundings. Just then, Melanie's urgent voice rang loudly in his ear, "Boss, there's a red zombie over there." Red? Lin Yi was startled and looked in the direction, feeling a chill in his heart. Sure enough, 3 zombies with unusually developed muscles were moving toward him with eerie movements. They really were red. These zombies had muscles bulging high and their skin had a chilling, eerie red, as if they had been soaked in fresh blood. Are these the same as those tentacle-controlled zombies from the lab? No, this is absolutely a more evolved form. Can I assume that the monsters from the lab have escaped? There was no response, except for Melanie's rapid breathing in the headset. Hiss. The red zombies suddenly let out a hiss. Lin Yi retreated with his pistol. "Don't hiss at me, the third-class pistol isn't just for show." He wasn't afraid of it, he was afraid these creatures might come not just in a few, but in hordes. The red zombies didn't open their mouths, but continued hissing while slowly approaching. Their limbs twisted and moved at angles completely contrary to human logic, every movement chilling to watch. As they drew near, the intense stench of decay mixed with the scent of fresh blood, innards, and rotting flesh hit him, nearly making him gag. Bang! With a thunderous sound, Lin Yi decisively fired. One red zombie's head burst instantly, its body flew backward like a broken string. Not accepting the face means losing the head. The third-class pistol is indeed effective. You have gained 5 experience points, hiss hiss hiss. The other zombies were furious at the sudden attack, hissed even more maniacally with threats. Soon after, more red zombies, as if emerging from the ground, began appearing one after another throughout the street. As if they had been hiding all along. One suddenly lunged from behind a car, moving too fast to react. Another one silently emerged from behind a building door, with eyes glowing menacingly red. And several more jumped directly from the first-floor windows, landing heavily on the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. In the blink of an eye, nearly 100 red zombies had surrounded Lin Yi, leaving no space. Truly, fearing something invites it. Melanie's voice was filled with fear and panic. "You're surrounded, boss." Chapter 96, Catch Me, Start Hugging Me. Dusk, street corner. Bang. 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 Lin Yi retreated while continuously firing, trying to tear open a gap in the encirclement of red zombies, then slip away through it. But the red zombies quickly realized that slowly encircling their prey was not feasible, so they swiftly spread out, tightly locking Lin Yi in the center. This pack of 100 red zombies, each one eager to approach Lin Yi, to give him a warm embrace. This can't go on. After taking down 4 more red zombies, Lin Yi instantly vanished at the street corner and returned to the shelter. The red zombies frantically searched around, but upon finding nothing, decided to stay where they were. To be precise, a portion of the zombies stayed at the spot where Lin Yi disappeared, while the rest hid, waiting for an opportunity. Inside the shelter, Lin Yi sat in front of the laptop, his face grim as he took in the scene. These creatures' intelligence levels were getting higher and higher. He cursed a few times and prepared to head to Professor Mark's laboratory to have him bandage up the injuries. "Boss, wait. Come look at this quickly." Just as Lin Yi had walked about 10 meters, Melanie shouted from behind him. Lin Yi quickly returned to the laptop. The screen displayed a strange column-like object, resembling a giant cornstalk, 5 meters high and 2 meters in diameter, astonishingly made of flesh. Ordinary zombies gathered around it excitedly, seemingly full of awe for it. Suddenly, a few tentacles extended from inside the cornstalk, piercing through the zombies' bodies. They began to be transformed and controlled. The ordinary zombies let out sharp screams, their skin gradually turning red, muscles continuously inflating, and the ground soon became covered with hair and shredded fabric. Lin Yi said solemnly, "If there's any change, let me know. We need to leave there quickly." "Okay, boss." Melanie nodded. After giving instructions, he went to old Mark's laboratory, where the professor quickly cleaned and bandaged his wounds. Fortunately, the wounds weren't infected, and after using some magical lake water, they were expected to heal soon. But the abrasions would at least hurt for half a day. "Am I afraid of pain?" Lin Yi scoffed at old Mark's words. Since the shelter couldn't be expanded while bordering the space-time fragment, he decided to take a nap. "It really hurts." Lin Yi curled up in the blanket, shivering in pain, his inhales sharp from the discomfort, making it hard to fall asleep. Boss, wake up. Why are you taking so long?" What are you doing?" Natasha walked into the boss's room and saw Annie lying on the boss's bed, held tightly by his strong arms. "Help me. I tried to get the boss out of bed, and he grabbed me and started hugging me. He's still asleep now. Annie was almost in tears. Alright. Little Natasha suddenly shouted excitedly, "Boss! The wheat field's on fire. It's already half burned." Lin Yi suddenly opened his eyes. He then saw the girl with a mischievous grin standing by his bedside. "Your way of waking people up is really harsh. I almost had a heart attack. The point is, shouldn't you explain why Annie is on your bed?" Lin Yi turned his head to see Annie lying beside him, teary-eyed. "Why are you on my bed? I tried to wake you, but you grabbed me and then started hugging me. I couldn't break free." "Ha ha ha. My apologies." Lin Yi laughed heartily and released Annie. At that moment, her expression was like that of a startled kitten, bouncing off the bed as soon as she broke free. Seeing the girl still wiping away tears with dripping fingers, Lin Yi stroked his chin, having a sudden idea. "As compensation, I authorize you to name the soon-to-be hatched chicks, alright?" "Really?" Annie's eyes lit up. She loved animals but had grown bored of bunnies and couldn't wait for the chicks to hatch. "Of course." Lin Yi smiled and said, "Now, can you tell me what you came to see me about?" "Solomon and his team are back." "Understood, wait for me to change clothes." Solomon's team stopped by the double gates, where a temporary military camp was set up. The warriors, though exhausted, looked satisfied. Seeing Lin Yi arrive, everyone immediately stood respectfully. "Boss." Solomon hurried forward. Lin Yi nodded, signaling everyone to continue resting, then asked, "How did it go?" "Killed 119 zombies, 2 beastmen warriors likely injured, no deaths." "Well done. But now, what to do next?" Lin Yi found a place to sit, took out his notebook, and communicated with the shelter. "System, we've killed all the zombies. Can we now occupy this world of space-time fragments?" "No, to occupy a space-time fragment, you need to install a specific item on it. What exactly is it?" "Go find it in the store, you bastard." Lin Yi felt it wasn't worth bickering with the system, so he opened the store app. 10 minutes later, he found an item with an unassuming name, called Unification Device. Small Unification Device, consumable, a device used for capturing space-time fragments. Maximum fragment size, medium. How to use: install the unification device on the space-time fragment and activate it. Please note, the unification speed depends on the device's distance from the center of the space-time fragment. Note, when the device is activated, all hostile entities on the space-time fragment will try to destroy it. Note, once the space-time fragment from another world is captured by the unification device, all hostile entities in that world will be instantly annihilated. Price, 1,000 coins. The small unification device looked like a cylinder, about 3 centimeters high and 1 centimeter in diameter. Its surface had a display screen and a red button labeled Activate. After buying the unification device, Lin Yi stared at it, feeling quite intrigued. If he installed this little gadget and held this control point, would it mean he could eliminate all enemies in a short time? But precisely because of this, during that time, all enemies would launch a crazed counterattack. A tower defense game? Competitive game? No longer thinking about it, Lin Yi took Solomon and a few warriors and re-entered the world of space-time fragments. Upon entry, the unification device reacted, displaying a small arrow on its screen. Following the arrow's guidance, everyone reached the center of the world of space-time fragments. According to Solomon, the world's zombies were cleared, and there shouldn't be any danger. Thus, Lin Yi placed the unification device on the ground and pressed the red button. Then a quiet but somehow extremely grating beep began sounding. About 30 seconds later, a hole opened at the bottom of the unification device, and white light shot out from it. The light grew stronger by the second, finally turning into a laser-like white beam scorching the ground. At this point, the unification device's screen turned into a countdown timer, showing 1 hour and 5 minutes. Space-time fragment capture initiated, time until completion, 1:04:55, great. The unification device had already begun capturing the space-time fragment. But just then, several roars sounded, and some zombies suddenly charged out of the forest. They were ordinary zombies, posing no real threat. But this clearly indicated that Solomon and his crew hadn't entirely cleared this space-time fragment.